Good evening. I'd like to call the East Greenbush Central School District Board of Education meeting for April 15th, 2026 to order. Can we all rise for the pledge?
Flag of the United States, which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
You're all here. First up, student council.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us back. So we're going to start off with 3 weeks ago on the Thursday, we went to our leadership conference. It was all about building bridges and connections between people and just kind of having better environments at school and really learning how to be a better person and to learn better as well as teach other people a lot more things that they don't know. We also shared a lot of ideas that our school does for our student council, as well as we learned a bunch of things that other student councils do and how different environments are, how people kind of run things and what does and doesn't work. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we need to do to improve on, and I think that a lot of these schools really helped out with all of that. We also had our blood drive that next day. It was pretty good. We had, I believe, 26 student volunteers, I think that's what they're called, that gave blood, as well as some other staff and everyone. I think it was great. Can't wait for the next one.
And then we've been working hard to plan our vendor fair. It's going to be on May 9th, and we hope to make this an annual tradition. We're going to have a food truck or some sort of food and coffee, and then there's a bunch of vendors signed up. I think we have close to 40 signed up, and that will be in the teacher parking lot because there's a bunch of other sporting games that day. So hopefully that's a good way to bring in customers to come to the vendors, and they'll keep wanting to come back. So if you're free that day, definitely come check out our vendor fair on May 9th. And then today at our student council meeting, we had the class officers all come and give updates on what they were planning. So the senior and junior classes are obviously working on planning their proms, so they've been very busy. And then the juniors are also planning another parents' night out, hopefully this spring. The sophomores are planning a dodgeball tournament, which is very exciting, very fun. We don't have all the details on that, but hopefully they'll let us know, and we'll let you guys know as well. And then the freshmen are kind of figuring out what works for them, what fundraisers are best, and they're working on the junior prom walk-in. So the freshmen are in charge of that. And then the sophomores are helping the seniors as well. And that's all we have today, so thank you.
Quick question, your leadership forum, was that like schools just around here, or did you travel for that? Or?
Yes, so there's every single year Suburban Council puts it on, and then the school that hosts it rotates. So I think I didn't go this year. We usually have the 9th, 10th, 11th graders go, but last year I know it was at Proctor's, so that was very fun. Where was it this year?
This year I was at,
Who hosted it?
I want to say Boston Spa. I don't know though.
Okay, it was a great experience though, and I went to it the past 3 years, and it was really great to be around like-minded people and hear what their ideas and share ours as well.
That's great.
Quick question associated. I had the same thing about the leadership conference. Not to put you on the spot, but building bridges sounds so important. It's the second time I heard it today, and I'm just wondering if you got a takeaway. It's okay if you don't.
I mean, well, we had to actually build a couple bridges between two chairs with popsicle sticks and straws. That was very challenging. We mixed it up a lot with different schools to like work with different people, meet new people. I don't know. I feel like what I kind of got from it was like, without everybody working together, like the bridge wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have stood. It's just, we need a lot of teamwork and we need a lot of ideas to do things.
That is so wonderful. And I just want to say, portrait of a graduate, like popsicle sticks, like I'm just hearing a connection there, right? Because you actually had like a creative activity, right? Where the subject matter was actually building a bridge. You collaborated, built the bridge. I'm just thinking like how to kind of use that. I think that's great training. Glad that you shared. And I just heard portrait of a graduate there too, but thank you so much.
What time, Natalie, is the thing? On the 9th? Yeah.
10 to 2.
Okay, fine. I wasn't sure more. Okay, thanks.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Approval of the draft minutes. Any comments or questions? I think we're present except Mike. So motion to approve. RP, second. Cindy, all those in favor? And abstain? Okay, moving on to the public forum. Residents, students, employees, and business representatives of the East Greenbush Central School District may address the board on matters concerning programs and or operations of the district, other than matters involving personnel. Members of the board do not directly respond to citizen concerns during the public forum. If a response is appropriate, either the president or superintendent will contact the individual in the near future. Those persons wishing to address the board will be recognized by the chair of the meeting and should state for the record their name and address or affiliation with the district or business. While the board does not wish to infringe upon free speech protections, it must be stressed that the visitors forum is not deemed to be an open forum. The board president will conduct the forum for the orderly and efficient operation of board business. In addition, any remarks which may be considered defamatory or stigmatizing are prohibited and will be declared out of order. All comment shall be limited to 5 minutes. Ingrid?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Ingrid Espinosa. My son is at Goff and he's been at the elementary schools for 9 years. And I'm here because I sent a letter to the board a couple of weeks ago. And I just wanted to reiterate and kind of give a face to the letter and explain some of my concerns. So I'm not gonna read the letter. You'll probably have it. I just want to reiterate my main concern. One of my concerns is with the just the laptops in our children's education. And I, as I said in the letter, I think everybody's recognizing that while the laptops were amazing during COVID and the crisis of, we needed remote learning, I think, we all, parents, families, the school districts around the country are really realizing and around the world that really having a screen in front of our children, individual computers all the time is very distracting, and it's kind of taking away from the real learning. So I just ask you plan ahead, and it's not something that obviously can happen overnight, but as you plan ahead and look even at the budget or just long term, really I would like to advocate for starting to move away from the one-to-one replacements. So, it probably costs tens of thousands of dollars a year. Why do we need one-to-one, one device per child? Moving away from that and really refocusing on, learning, true learning that we all know and love. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that that's really, it is happening. I am part of a number of committees nationwide that we're trying to bring advocacy to our local communities. I'm also going to be talking to our legislators about a bill to rein in AI in education, and that was my second main topic of my letter. It is really to rethink and not to rush, and not to buy in that AI is the best. I know that we have it. I think at the high school, and it's probably starting to move into the middle schools, or the thought is to go there. I think I just want to caution and make sure that we are really more focused on educating children on the ethical and the proper use of those tools, rather than just teaching them teaching the tools, how to use our children, learning, teaching our children how to use those tools in more of the ethical and humane use of this technology that's being thrown at us. So I just wanted to just thank you for everything you do, and just put that in the back of your heads as you move ahead into your future planning.
Can I ask you a question? Have you had any luck with the legislators? Have you started meeting with them?
So there's a bill. It's a model bill that's been put together. That's been put up in a number of states, and I don't have the number of states, but I'm going to be in the committee to put it up to our legislators in New York. I know that everybody, many are concerned about the technology and that privacy and really the humane side of, or non-humane side of AI and technology. And I think we just want to start moving forward, especially in New York State. I don't think that model bill has been implemented, which is why I'm going to be in that committee. So more to come. I just wanted to start, this is our school district and I love it. And I just want to put that out there because things are happening and we just want to be careful and cautious. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
So the committee that you said you're on, what organization is that?
So Common Sense, Fair Play for Kids, they have a committee, and that's putting up the model AI bill. And I have a draft. If somebody wants to see it, you have my email in the letter. So just let me know if you want to see it. But
And did that model AI bill also address laptops and screens? That was.
so that's the model AI bill, but there's also other technology concerns that we're trying to raise at the national level, and that's one of them. I attended a forum where I don't have the doctor's name in front of me. I would have to start looking into it, but neurologists, scientists are cautioning against the use of this, laptops in front of our kids, developing brains. It's too much to ask to have that computer in front of them. And also ask them to pay attention. So we're trying to scale back and get back into the true learning. That's, difficult, and it's not a game, it's true learning that we're trying to get back to. But if you would like to see, or anybody would like to see more information on computers and the harm of laptops in education, and I think there was a New York Times article less than a month ago. One school in I think Wyoming or Kentucky is really scaling back and just going back to paper and pencil. And it's not so just, I know I'm out of time, but it's not anti-technology. I mean, obviously it's out there and we need to, but it's how to use it. And it's not, especially for developing brains, having a computer in front of them is really not the best way to implement. It was good in an emergency situation, but not in our daily life, in our children's daily lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tammy Cosgrove, Caitlin B.
Hi, my name is Tammy Cosgrove. I'm one of the school nurses at Columbia High School, and I'm also the health services coordinator. It was brought to my attention today by looking at the board agenda for tonight that we could possibly be losing one of our nurses. Our district-wide nurse covers each elementary school 1 day a week. If there is a cause for her to cover a building that's uncovered because there is no substitutes, our substitute list appears to be 11 on the list of nurses. However, 8 of them have full-time positions besides subbing for our district, so their availability is limited. So if those buildings are unattended, she covers those positions. She has covered 34 days in an elementary building this school year alone, 47 last year as the substitute nurse because there was no subs. If her position is eliminated, we will be without a nurse in some buildings. How will we handle that emergency, for lack of better words? And so I am here to advocate that, yes, it is a district-wide. She is a district-wide nurse. Not only does she cover when we don't have other nurses in buildings, but she assists our 5 elementary nurses who there are some schools with over 300 kids and some schools with over 500 kids, not including our preschool programs, to help that building nurse cover her state mandated jobs or state mandated performances such as vision, hearing, and scoliosis, which is difficult to do by yourself when you're doing first aid for example, Janae, 500 kids plus preschool programs that have been added to our district. As you know, the preschool programs have been added to our buildings. I believe 3 buildings has preschool programs. None of the East Greenbush staff service these buildings except for the school nurses. The services such as speech, PT, and OT are through Questar. However, they do not do the state mandates or service these students if they are ill and or injured. It's the school nurses of this district. So that is adding extra classes to our buildings and taking away our district nurse who helps 1 day a week in those 5 buildings would be detrimental and could be unsafe, especially if we do not have a nurse in a building And as I said, she has covered 34 times in a school, in a building office by herself because there was no school nurse substitutes. And with that, I am going to introduce Caitlin Heeg, our current school nurse of Janae Elementary School.
My name is Caitlin Haig. I'm a school nurse at Janae. I was recently hired. I'm also a taxpayer in the district. I have a child in the school district. So I come with two different avenues here. Let me put my glasses on. Can you all hear me? I also can't see. Mike's not even on, I don't think. It's oh, I was like, it's not even on.
Speak loud enough. Sorry about that.
All right, so.
Yeah, you need the mic for the.
Oh, I
for
need the mic for this. I'm sorry. Okay. Apologize. Yeah, terrible public speaker. All right, I'm writing this letter to express my grave concern for the proposed elimination of the 1.0 FTE floating nurse position. As a registered nurse with many years of experience, school nursing experience in a neighboring school district, I experienced firsthand the effects of eliminating school nursing positions. This was devastating to the school community and most importantly to the students that they served. I'm a newly hired nurse in the district and have been a substitute nurse for the past 3 years. I have had experience in all but 2 of the schools, both public, private, and parochial that the district serves, so I understand the needs across all of the buildings. In addition, I'm a parent of a student with multiple medical issues who has greatly benefited from the care received by the school nurses in this district. As a parent, I was confident sending my child to school because I knew that there were school nurses to attend to her needs when warranted. And I get upset thinking about this because I'm passionate about my child. In school nursing, I knew that there were school nurses to attend to her needs when warranted. I'm also a taxpayer in this district with a vested interest in this budget proposal. School nurses play a vital role in maintaining the health and safety of students. School nursing is complex and is not a one-size-fits-all position. It is not simply applying a Band-Aid or handing out an ice pack. Every student that enters the health office requires the full attention of the nurse and a thorough assessment to determine the proper treatment, disposition, necessary follow-up, and communication with parents, teachers, and other related staff. The medical needs of students related to both physical and mental health is increasing. Students' needs are more complex, which requires additional time spent with each student to provide the necessary care to ensure that they are ready and engaged and successful learners. The role of the floating nurse is vital for the elementary schools in our district. Having this nurse just 1 day a week at each school elementary school is instrumental. Sorry, take a deep breath. It's terrible. Is instrumental in ensuring that all the required New York State mandated screenings are completed, immunization compliance is adhered to, and body mass index reporting is submitted, just to name a few. This nurse also provides crucial support in caring for students at each elementary school and is heavily relied upon as a substitute in the absence of other nurses. Eliminating this role is a complete disservice to all of the elementary students in our district, and quite frankly, puts the district at risk for non-compliance of New York State mandates and subpar care for our students. So I urge you to reconsider the elimination of the position. Thank you. Sorry, that was long.
Did ask.
Moving along, board forum.
Yeah, I'm holding to.
I just want to say congratulations to Tom Ross. I caught his little snippet on the television in the news the other night, and he is a fantastic teacher, really engaging to students. And for someone who hated physics, I wish I had him as a teacher. So congratulations to him.
Yeah, I had Mr. Ross and he was really a wonderful person. So congratulations, Mr. Ross. That's all.
Just not kind of tangential to the district. An opportunity to go to the Siena U Albany lacrosse game, which is larger than life was the theme, and it really honored Liam Gleason, Coach Gleason, who passed away, Jackie's spouse, and they celebrated the family, his life, and it was really a really moving event. Unfortunately, Siena lost, but that's okay. They played well, and but the honoring of the family and all they've been through, and I'm glad we were to support Ms. Gleason in the district and whatever they need as a family. So I think it was a wonderful event. I just want to mention that. Nothing, thank you. So,
Okay, moving on to reports and presentations. First up, Utica National Insurance Group School Safety Excellence Award 2026.
Great. So thank you. So every year, our insurance carrier, Utica National, allows for applications for recognition for district-wide safety excellence. And this goes well beyond just that of thinking about securing our front doors with SROs, with things that we do to lock our doors. It's our overall ratings with things like workers' compensation accidents, on-the-job accidents. And we are so pleased to announce that again for this year, our district has been recognized as a 2026 School Safety Excellence Award. And the plaque reads in recognition of our school's outstanding efforts to create a safer school environment as a direct result of the school's diligence and adherence to safety principles prescribed to safety group members. This certificate is hereby awarded to the East Greenbush School District on March 25th, 2026, which also came with a small endowment of
Oh, I don't remember.
$500 that will be deposited to our general fund. So we are very grateful not only to Utica National for that recognition, but for all of our staff and everything that they do day in and day out to preserve the safety of the district holistically.
When we say endowment, do we mean in perpetuity or just a singular payment?
A singular
All
payment.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yes. That'd be great.
Next up, 2026-27 proposed budget.
So while that gets queued up, as you know, as per our budget calendar, we are now in workshop number 3 of our budget presentations as we work towards the board having to adopt next week the budget to put before the community. And this week, we will be giving you, as we get ready here, this week, we'll be highlighting for you the changes that have been made to the proposed budget for the board to adopt since budget workshop number 2. We'll be giving you a budget overview of where we currently stand with the amendments that we've made. We'll be discussing the proposed reductions on how we can balance the budget. Then I'll be handing the microphone over for a little while for Mrs. Mulligan to talk about our fund balance projections through the end of the fiscal year 2029. Along with that will be the proposed use of some of our reserves and looking into the future on our fiscal outlet. Then we'll talk about what are the final steps of the budget process for this fiscal year, and then we'll make some reminders on the important dates to conclude this process. So just at a glance here, where have we stood historically over time since we've started our budget process planning for the 26-27 fiscal year. Again, a quick snapshot of our revenue projection between our property taxes, state aid, and all other revenue. We are looking at a potential of increased revenue of 3.5% of an increase over 2025-2026. We need to pause and remember there that we still do not have a state approved budget. And we need to remember that there could be variations and changes that still come. The complexity of this is that you have a statutory requirement as a Board of Education to adopt your budget next week before the state concludes their budget process. So while these are the numbers that we're projecting and we're doing it based on the legislative proposals that we have to keep that in mind. On the positive side, yes, the number could go up a little bit. On the negative side, that number could also go down, and we would automatically be dealing with a hole in our budget that potentially would be approved by the community. So we just need to keep that in mind, but you are required by law to move forward with your budget proposal for the new fiscal year.
Dr. Coates, I'm just curious, like thinking about the legislative process, like I'd imagine the delay, like, is it education that's a part of the do we anticipate that anything is going to change like legislatively? Or are we thinking that it might be a limited set of issues that they're considering? Yeah.
So let's remember holistically, the 2 largest expenditures in the state are Medicaid and education.
Absolutely.
So do I believe that we're done yet? I don't.
Yeah.
So do I think that there potentially could be some changes? Yes, I do. I think there could still be some changes. The topics of conversation right now, we know that the governor's climate law, we hear a lot about that in the news. There's a lot on insurance reform that I'm still hearing discussed at the state level. I don't repeatedly hear education coming up, but
Yes.
nevertheless,
Yes,
they don't have a lot of buckets left to take from or to put in.
I hear what you're saying.
So if the
It's
money
always
moves,
on the block is what you're saying.
it's always on the block because it's the largest source, one of the largest sources of expenditures in the state.
Perfect. Thank you.
So that being said, just giving a historical perspective of where we've been and where we are now, we started our budget process on the expenditure side with a projection of about a 5.02% increase at about $121 million. We knew that that would have been over the maximum allowable cap this year, so we started the reduction process, looking for efficiencies, looking for savings. At that point, we also knew with some of the legislative proposals that in terms of increases in universal pre-K, looking at what the proposal for our state aid would be, we were able to get some of that down. We ended up at about 119.8 million at that point, still being over the cap. What we were going to propose to you tonight, how we are looking to reduce the budget down far enough to stay at or below the maximum allowable tax cap for the new year. One of the things that we also will be proposing as a finalization of the budget process tonight too is in looking how we're going to finally balance the budget, what iteration of both fund balance and our reserve balance are we going to look to use for the new year? So looking at a quick budget overview, our proposed expenditures are at about $118.872 million. Our total revenue based on the state aid and all other sources is going to be about 246,000, which will require us to use about $7.6 million in our reserves to balance the structural budget deficit. As we did last year, without me reading all the columns, our recommendation to the board is simply to push forward or use the same amounts of reserves and appropriated fund balance to balance the New Year's budget. Again, as I shared with you a few minutes ago, Mrs. Mulligan's going to talk about what that does to our fiscal picture moving forward with that use of reserves and fund balance. Always keeping in mind, if you think back to our last budget presentation, we use that graph about our budgeted amount and our expenditures. As that line gets closer and closer and closer together where we're spending all of our budget, the ability of the budget to generate reserves, to generate savings is lessening every year. So the use of appropriated fund balance compounds the issue over time. It makes it even more challenging because you have to reduce the subsequent year's budget by that much more if your budget's not generating that savings in the prior fiscal year. So just as a graphic of the ins and the outs and the objects of expenditures, you have all of our revenues on the left-hand side, where our sources of revenues come from. And again, if you look at the bottom left-hand side, we've noted on that graphic that this is our non-renewable. This is money that once we spend it, we don't get it back. All the others are sources of revenue that, if you will, we can go back to the till on a regular basis. We levy property taxes, we have pilot revenue, we get state and federal aid on a regular basis. On the objects of expenditures, again, without reading them all, these are our variables. These are the difficult decisions that we have to make to balance a high quality program, but also to be able to meet the demands of the program, but also to be sensitive to the community as a whole. We want to make sure that to the best of our ability, we're staying at or below the cap as we started our conversation earlier this year. And again, this is just a graphic on where the money goes and where we get it from. So now getting into some of the more challenging conversations. Before I get into speaking about proposed reductions, one of the things that I want to remind the board, yes, these are conversations on what the proposed reductions would be, but ultimately when you approve a budget amount to go forward, you're not necessarily approving these reductions in force, if you will. You are approving a number. That number, as we said, can move. So while we're having conversations on how we get there and how we have to balance that budget, should we in July make a different decision, just remember, if we pull one reduction out, something else has to go in to fill that spot. So while we're having these conversations now on proposals and how we're going to get there, just keep in mind, your ultimate approval is on the budget amount. Okay, it's on the dollar figure, that 118 plus million. Okay.
Dr. Coles, and I just want to ask too, and that like your budget figures is also based upon a presumed tax cap vote, I'm imagining too, right?
Correct. This
Yes.
budget is at or below the maximum allowable
Yeah.
tax cap. That's correct.
Absolutely. The reason why I'm asking, so in, I'll wait till after.
Okay. So in conversations and planning with our building and district administrators, we looked critically at every aspect of the district. We wanted to do everything possible to preserve program, to have the reductions that we had to propose to make have as minimal impact on classroom instruction as we possibly could. One of the areas that we did examine was in the middle school. We looked at both the Jumpstart and the MAP program that currently are in the middle school. Those programs were created with some of the additional funds that the district received during the COVID period. We had an influx of cash that came through federal influx money. One of the pieces that we noticed when I met with the middle school administration is the data that comes from those programs. The program simply isn't working. We're looking at high rates of failure still in those programs. We're looking at high rates of chronic absenteeism in there. And the middle school believes that they would be able to make some better decisions and plan for the future if we move forward to eliminate that program for next year. Again, without reading all of the potential reductions that would be made there, with those staff changes, we will look at differences in class sizes. We would look at where those students would return to. But again, in conversation with the middle school administration, the data was very telling that the programs simply were not working.
Dr. Coles, quick question. And what I'm wondering is thinking forward, right, about impact of today's decisions. And it's going to be a theme of conversation that I plan to have. But what I'm wondering is, how do we know a year from now, right, the impact on students? And can we develop a way to kind of,
Yep. So the guidance department already has
Yeah.
information on those student profiles that were recommended for that program.
Yeah.
A year from now, if they are reintegrated back into a regular classroom, we'll be able to monitor what their passage rate is, what their attendance rate is, what their behavior looks like. We'll be able to see very clearly if there was an impact or not
Yes.
on whether or not elimination of these programs had an effect on their academic and attendance and behavioral performance.
And to just like, because any like change to program, like I would be personally interested in just seeing like any change in program, like just looking forward, saying so that over time, thinking long term, we can make better and better decisions and recognize the impact of our decisions as a board.
So just staying on the instructional side as well, one of the things that Mrs. Mahar's office is responsible for is when we have a student that is out of school for any reason, tutoring, once it comes through the building level, comes to her office for final approval. And one of the things that we were tracking was as we were sending tutors to homes and to libraries to meet individually with students, that there was a large amount of absenteeism, which by contract, our teachers are still allowed to bill for if they prepped and they've gone to meet with a student, but the student doesn't show up. We're essentially still paying for students not receiving services. So one of the redesigns that we are looking at for next year is to create essentially a tutoring center after school at the building. That tutoring center will operate both in person and remotely. So whoever is assigned at that tutoring center would have the ability, if a student couldn't get to the building, as long as they had internet access, they could still have access to a qualified teacher to help them during that period of absence. We're hoping that that will help to rein in some of those extra costs that were certainly mounting. We did some data mining on that over the last 3 years, and those costs were growing very rapidly, to be honest with you. We believe that reining some of this in will certainly help to control some of those costs, but it will also give a guarantee that students will know that they will have access to a teacher for that support at a given time after school each and every day. We also looked at the non-instructional side. On the non-instructional side of the house, we do have a database specialist that works here in the central office that will be retiring. The intent would be not to fill that position. We have a full-time typist that was working at the transportation department that has resigned to take another position in a different district. We would not fill that position. On the next position, the custodial food service position, I want to be clear, this would not affect someone's employment. The proposal is to move the cost of this position over to the school lunch fund. One of the things that we discussed in a previous meeting is because we have the universal free meals now, there used to be an interfund transfer from the general fund budget to the school lunch fund to make the budget whole. It's really not necessary anymore because of the funding that we're getting from the universal free meals. The fund is actually whole and it's sustaining itself. So that school lunch fund operates separate from the general fund because this person works as a courier for the food, cleaning in the kitchens. We can take that portion of their salary and assign it to the school lunch fund. There's also a proposal for an elimination of the position for Assistant Supervisor of Transportation. And again, as was already noted tonight, there is a proposal here for the elimination of a floating nurse position also. Also on some of the non-instructional sides, as we've been talking about repeatedly throughout all of our budget sessions, healthcare costs are something that is not just a mounting concern, it's here and it's a serious concern for all employees. Mrs. Mulligan spent a lot of time really doing data mining on what our projected costs will be for prescription drugs. She felt comfortable making a reduction in the original proposal from 20% down to 17% increase for next year, which from our original proposal would save us about an additional $220,000.
Could you just talk a little bit more about like what that means exactly? Like,
So when you have to cross-check the number of employees that you have in the district that are enrolled in your plan, you can do a historical look back at how many people that we have had. Then you will also cross-check that with the numbers on the proposals that you're receiving from the provider. With that historical, looking at what we know the increases will be, together with the number of employees that we're planning to have in the district, you can do some projections on where our numbers will stand looking into the new fiscal year. And we felt comfortable based on some of that historical data, making that reduction proposal. Good. On some of our non-salary items. So the first one I wanted to spend a little bit of time on. So universal pre-K. As we know, we have what I'll call a hybrid approach here in the district of universal pre-K. We have a relation with Questar BOCES, but we also have a relationship with several community-based organizations that run some offsite locations for us. Some of those expenses are assigned to the general fund. Some of the charges that we receive from Questar are well above this year what we receive in terms of reimbursement from the state. We have seen in both the legislative and the governor's proposal that the allocation from next year is proposed to go from $5,400 per student to $10,000 per student. We have had numerous conversations with our elected officials asking, is there a high level of confidence that this will be approved in this budget? And the answer that we repeatedly received is yes. I want to be clear that the assumption here of taking this amount out of the budget is that that $10,000 per student allocation will be approved in the state budget. Also want to be clear, if that doesn't happen, similar to what I talked about in the beginning of this conversation, if we receive less state aid, that's $360,000 that we would be short already as we open the new fiscal year. Again, we're making this assumption based on the information that we're getting from our elected officials, even though we don't have an approved state budget. But again, we think this is an important area where we can make some reductions, still supporting a quality program, still keeping a good partnership with Questar and with our community-based organizations, and allowing us to continue to offer a good UPK program here in the district.
Dr. Coates, does that 10,000 per pupil cover all of our costs?
So
No. Okay.
right now with Questar, no, but it closes a significant portion of the gap. With our community-based organizations, absent of one provider, and I'm going to forget who it is, forgive me, ACAC, that we are billed at the $5,400. What will happen is if this is approved, So we had an RFP in the beginning, once we opened universal pre-K. Those contracts are allowed to be renewed annually under that contract. We're in a tough position right now because we're late in the fiscal year, we're late in the planning process. We would have loved to have opened an RFP right now, but we have no surety of whether that money is going to come through. Making the assumption that it will, once we start the new school year, we will open a new RFP, which will allow for us to reopen the contracts, and they will be able to address their billable amounts moving forward into the new year. We're assuming that even if it comes up, we're going to have some conversations on what's going to be in the contract, but that's what we're forecasting moving into the fall as of right now.
Dr. Coates, how much is Questar currently charging us?
10,800, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's on a per classroom basis.
Oh, right. But
I
it
believe
works
it's
out.
around $194,000 per classroom, which is for 18 students. So the actual rate per student is just under $11,000. And so the remaining money that's in the general fund budget to support the local share of the UPK program is approximately $70,000. I haven't looked at that number in a little bit, but that sounds pretty familiar.
And when the RFP was originally put out, the hybrid between Questar and the private providers, was there just not enough interest from the private providers to cover all of the students? Is that when Questar just backfills what we need? Is that essentially how it happened?
So there was an RFP process, and based on just program selection, Questar was selected as the program provider. And then subsequent to that, so they were the initial provider in the district. We had started out with, it was just before my time, but I was on the other side of the house too. Thank you, Cindy, for the reminder. 2, and then that grew to 4 classrooms. And then during that time it was growing is when we expanded to the community-based organizations. But the RFP process originally,
increased
yeah.
each year.
I'm
So,
sorry, Lisa.
couple board meetings ago when I presented, I showed you guys that over the past 5 years, we've increased our classes. So we're up to 10 right now, which is almost serving all of the students that apply and are eligible.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, I was here when that one was put together. It was really it was a kind of pilot startup program. We had district-based classrooms, and it was easy to fill those. So these are not in the district. So that's kind of one of the discerning factors too, is that as the program's popularity and sustainability became more viable, we didn't have the classroom space existing in the district, so we went to the outside provider.
And just keep in mind too, one of the provisions of the governor's side of the proposal for the increase in UPK is in Amendment 2829 that any child that comes forward that is eligible, that is seeking a UPK seat, is offered one. We're in a very good place. I think we're down to maybe 2 or 4 students that we didn't place this year. It's very low, but at that point, you will be required to offer any student that comes forward a seat. So I fully expect that once, assuming that we do run the RFP in the fall, it's going to become more enticing now for private agencies because the allocation has increased, perhaps to consider placing an RFP to work with their local school districts, that we may see some new community-based organizations come forward as an opportunity.
Dr. Coates, so you had said a second ago when a community provider provides UPK, they charge us and we give them the 5,400. Is that
so
per student?
We become the pass-through, if you will. Obviously, the money comes from the state. They have to provide evidence, and they bill twice a year, Ms. Morgan, in the middle of the year? Or is it
Monthly.
monthly? So they have to provide evidence of attendance, and they can only bill for the number of students that they have in their program. So pending that they're full, they're able to bill for the full amount. The money comes from the state to the district, and then goes from the district to the provider at that $5,400.
But it costs about 11K per student. So are those community providers just
No.
picking up their own?
Yeah, for the Questar 3 program.
Oh, for Questar.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we could go away from Questar if we had the opportunity.
I would say it would be a struggle because I just don't think that there's enough community-based organizations right now.
And those locations are in-house. too.
Correct. They're in the school building.
Yeah.
Well, there are laborers, that's why.
Yeah.
It's a deeper.
Well, yeah, I
conversation.
just like from a price standpoint. That's all.
Yeah, money is-
Negotiate.
Looking forward to special education, Mrs. Mulligan and I spent a great amount of time with Ms. Harris looking at some historical data on out-of-district placements and BOCES placements out of district for the students that require additional services that we can't accommodate in districts. And looking at some of that historical data and looking prospectively at the students that are in the pipeline, we felt comfortable reducing some of the contingency seats that we have available. And that would aggregate a savings of about another $250,000. Looking at buildings and grounds. So due to the size of some of our properties, the plow trucks that we have, if we have a snowfall, can't handle the amount of snow that has to get moved. So we annually rent a large front end loader that helps to move some of that snow, which obviously this year we needed. But Mr. Bickle had made a proposal. The rental company that we were working with had made us an offer to be able to try to buy the one that we were using. We were hoping that we were going to be able to do that with the new year. We had to obviously remove that from the budget, because it was about another $115,000.
Could you just talk about, like, with the special education placements, like just like overarching framework that was used in that decision-making process?
Yeah, so as I had shared, we look at both BOCES placements, but so typically your BOCES placements are your day placements, if you will. BOCES placements are usually where we transport students locally on a daily basis from home to a variety of different buildings at Questar, and in some cases Albany Capital Region BOCES we contract with. Those are typically a little bit less expensive. We look historically at the percentage of students that we have classified, the number of students annually that we send to those placements, and we look at the seats that we have used on a regular basis. Your out-of-district placements, more your residential placements, are obviously your more expensive placements. Those are not typically placements that have transportation. Students are there full-time. They're living there because they have the highest need. Again, you're looking at historical data, actual budgeted versus actual, and what did we have in reserve. And again, we were comfortable based on the number of seats that we had been using to make this small reduction.
Is that, when you have a student, I don't know if we have any of these students. Do we have any residential students?
Yes.
Does the state and federal aid amount of the 40 million include it? Isn't some of that aidable?
Actually, I don't think we have any residential students at the
We don't,
moment.
Not
I
right.
thought we had one.
Right, no.
We don't have one.
So what we do is
Maybe
we-
Okay, my mistake, sorry.
Okay,
I thought we had
but some of those, okay,
Yeah, that's okay. So there's usually a couple of different costs involved with those residential students. It's the day tuition, and then there's a maintenance, to share of maintenance cost for the residential component of that. And then it would be part of the high cost aid calculations as to whether or not what would generate aid on that student. So
So
there's a lot of
sometimes it is-
variability.
Okay.
Other questions?
The
Okay.
big concern about that is that's what we know now.
Right.
That's not what
that
could
could change
happen
tomorrow,
mid-year
right.
when students qualify or need an out-of-district placement. Then you're incurring a cost you didn't expect.
100%, and that can change in a day. Yep. All right, moving down, we again took a hard look at some of our utilization of BOCES services. We participated in an arts and education COSER. This was a line item reduction because looking at the buy-in, the COSER just simply wasn't being utilized. As part of our strategic plan, right now we contract for 2 days a week of a additional communication specialist. There were some items in the strategic plan that talked about additional outreach, and utilization of that service would have potentially allowed us an avenue to continue to move that portion of the strategic plan forward. We pulled that back to the 2 days that we have a week, as we did this year. The district had been contracting for 2 days a week of a health and safety COSA agreement to have a person in district to help us with some health and safety issues. Due to the rising costs of that, the proposal is to eliminate participation in that COSA. Some of those responsibilities would be shifted between my office, and we'd have to look for other ways to make sure that we didn't lose sight of some of the health and safety benefits of that COSA. And then Mrs. Mulligan also looked district-wide at some of the printer leases and the copier leases that were up for renewal. And again, we're going to just try to stretch the use of some of what we have a little bit further. Savings there, again, accumulated to about $125,000. Some of the other line item reductions that we made to balance next year's budget happened on the curriculum side of the house. Mrs. Mahar was able to look at areas where we could have some savings in terms of curriculum writing between summer curriculum and any of our new initiatives, made a small reduction. Our purchases of digital textbooks. Mrs. Mulligan took a look at our expenditures in terms of a refuse pickup. There was a small savings there. Our auto insurance, and the one piece that we're holding our breath on, if you will, is our utilities, the reductions there, where we're looking for reductions for next year. So again, that aggregated to about a total of about $140,000. So those reductions helped us get to a balanced budget for this year for the proposal that is in front of you tonight.
I have a question about some of the sort of just how we land on the expenditures when we look at last year's adopted budget, proposed budget, dollar change, and then kind of squaring the actuals. So like on digital textbooks as an example, it shows last year our adopted budget of 107, but this year we're showing a proposed budget of 147, so an increase of 40. But is it a reduction because the expenditures were 214 last year? So it's a reduction from the expenditure last year, but it's still an increase in proposed budget from last year to this year. Or is that?
Yeah. So what the reduction, I believe that particular line was a $10,000 reduction. It was a reduction from what the original proposed budget number was. So it's separate and distinct from the previous year. One of the things with the curriculum budget, these are our the digital textbooks particularly. I'm sorry, were you talking about curriculum or digital textbooks? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, curriculum everywhere. So the digital textbooks, we have software. So there's like, it's digital curriculum resources, and they're basically subscriptions over multiple years. So I've been working with Mrs. Mahar's office to like have a plan as to when those subscriptions renew, how many years they're going to be, and to make sure that budget is right sized for that. We got some quotes back on the renewal, what we were originally anticipating. It's a little bit less, so we were able to pull that down. I think it was about $10,000, that particular line item. So we're trying to get on more of an even scale, so there's more predictability. In the past, there had been budget transfers to accommodate new digital curriculum resource purchases based on excess funds left over in other lines. So we're trying to bring the budget to be more of a true budgeting process over those digital curriculum resources.
Okay. And even with the curriculum writing, for example, the line item that was coming from was a consultant. And I just saying that I can be the consultant, like we don't need to pay someone, like I can do that work. So we haven't been utilizing that line, so we were able to reduce it.
And that's on the curriculum rating.
Yep. Curriculum rating.
So the 10K reduction, that was from the budget that was proposed on March 11th.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
It's not like a reduction in digital textbooks.
It's
just-
not.
yeah.
It's I guess more right sizing the budget
And
allocation.
then Marty's taking the garbage.
Yes.
Oh, and no, that was another. So one of the things that Dr. Coates explained, and we'll see when we talk about fund balance a little bit more, is that what our budget is and what we're actually spending is getting closer. So it was like an alligator mouth. So some of these line item reductions aren't necessarily true cost reductions. It's squeezing it tighter.
Okay.
So that's another thing which will lead right into the conversation of why we're now spending those fund balance and reserves amounts. So
But ultimately, just keep in mind, we'll need to remember that, yes, perhaps not cost savings, but at the end of the day, if the money's not there, we can't spend.
Yeah.
Right. I
Okay.
mean, we can't, right, transfer it, but it,
Dr. Coates, just going back to the graphic, the last item, utility, gas, electric, does that include the estimated savings from the light replacement project that's soon to happen?
so, perhaps yes. And I say perhaps yes, because we do know that that is happening, right? We don't know exactly what the ultimate impact is going to be on that. National Grid told us some information about what that looks like. But the other thing is we're going to have new energy usage coming on board.
Right.
So we've actually been trying to gradually increase those lines to make sure that we're accommodating for that in the future. We had to pull back in order to,
I'm just
balance
curious.
this budget is ultimately what that is.
Right. I
So-
was just curious if the numbers that National Grid gave us about expected was just factored into the number. I understand the cost
Not-
of everything else is going to
Yep.
go up, but
not that exact science. So basically, we looked at the costs we're currently incurring, projecting that out with some assumed increases and looking at what the budget line is and evaluating that, okay, we could skim some off the top on that.
Other questions?
Yeah, just questions and comments. So based on what you're proposing on the reductions or specialty programs, we anticipate that there's no changes there. Instructional programs pretty much are consistent across the board, maintaining things as is. I can say that the Jumpstart, I'm not sure, the MAP definitely, those were programs we added when we had additional funds several years ago. And I know it was kind of a pilot. It did fill a need if the decision by administration is that it's not filling the need and there's alternative ways to service those students, then I think that's a good approach. The non-instructional reductions seem appropriate. I am concerned about the nurse. We had that position back in 21-22, primarily for some COVID, district service, out of placement needs, and the biggest concern with the coverage piece, we do have absenteeism that occurs. I would suggest that if that gets maintained, that if there's other funding sources to bring that back into the budget at some future date, we should do that because I know things change, but I think that coverage piece was important 5 years ago. It did serve a pretty high need at the time. And I think that it may be something that we have to take a look at and continue to evaluate. Other reductions seem appropriate for me. The pieces that you take a look at, I wish you could go deeper so we could look at some different things. If it's possible, I don't know if it's enough on the non-salary items, frankly. But if that's as far as you've been able to go so far, I think that would work for me, but I would like you to keep looking for more. I think it needs to go deeper. If we're looking at, the next part of our presentation is the reserve piece. I'm very concerned about that. I understand what is happening, but if there's things we can push into this year to purchase into the next year, just a lot of things that, I know it's a lot of heavy lift, but if we can, those thousands turn into tens of thousands, across the board. So continue to look for that. And, overall, I think that's my feelings on the budget so far.
Yeah, maybe at some point, I think it would be helpful to just have a briefing on nursing and healthcare services. Like, does that fall under your portfolio or
No,
just where does that?
Falls under PPS.
Oh, okay. Even that, like, just role, staffing, all of that, I think, helpful comments and just, I think I could use a little education on how we do that as a district. And I agree with Mike. I think, if there's some other things that, we could continue to look at, non-instructional, but yeah, there's a few things I've, highlighted. I asked a couple questions in email too, so I'd be curious about some of that stuff.
I have a quick, first I want to thank, you two, Jen, Ms. Mulligan, Dr. Coates, all of our admin staff for putting this together. I know it's a lot of work. I know it's not easy to put together a presentation when you're proposing these challenging decisions. You know, and thinking about what I thought about, you know, these cuts, I thought about some of the work that went into it. You know, what values did I have, right? Where are we as a board? You know, and some of the things that came to my mind was like, you know, like ultimately budgets is about decisions, right? And what I was thinking was, it's just, where are we in the pipeline for making the final decision, you know, and where would I like to be today, you know? And I was wondering, do I have the information for long-term strategy? Not saying that, you know, but effectively that's what I was thinking moving forward. How do we strengthen the position, right? That, because at this point in time, a lot of work already went into the preparation, right? So long story short, I was like, you know, how do we decide as a board, right? And what is our goal as a board? Where do we target that we're going, right? And I looked at board policy, and one thing I saw is that, right, one of our district goals, right, in 2000 is that, you know, each student, right, who attends achieve their maximum growth and development. You know, and and it says the district is comprehensive, comprising of very wide, you know, like wide abilities, right, and socioeconomic backgrounds, and post high school aspirations. So it's like that's the target, right? So everything that we do should kind of center on that as a goal. So when I look at the cuts, I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, what will be the result, right, of that as a goal? And how will we receive the information that let us know, are we getting closer or further from the target, right? Because ultimately, the target that we set is what, as you work through the budget process, whether we are having, you know, active discussions, right, or if communication is off, it's like the North Star, right? That if you will, you know. So with that said, one of the things that, you know, I'd be interested to see over time, really is disaggregated student information, you know, about performance. You know, so when we look at programs, you know, and we say, you know, special education students, you know, or jumpstart students, right, where we could really center in on how are students performing and what is the results and impacts of the decisions that we make today. And it's just challenging for me right here, right now, to say, you know, because like, you know, and that I just would love to have clarity around that point. So with that said, and another thing I wanted to say too, it was two things, right? Like really, I think as a focus as a district, I think it makes sense to kind of focus on education opportunity, right, and equity amongst our students, and also employment security, right? And the idea behind employment security is that it's really hard to focus on kids if you're worrying about your job, right? And I think that the two kind of goes hand in hand, you know, and I think we have to kind of be, you know, employed. And part of that was, I was wondering about FTE targets, like as a finance thing. Like, do we have the minimum amount of FTEs necessary to maintain our current programming in the current fiscal environment? Like, how do we create an FTE floor, right? To say, you know, but ideally, like in my mind, kind of that's what I was thinking, like long range planning, focusing on two pieces, and thinking about as a board, how do we govern through policy to create the target that irregardless, we always are arriving at the right place.
So I think on that note, one of the most important things to look at is where is our largest source of expenditure, and it's in human resource. So to go to the minimum standard, if you will, we have contractual requirements. We have contractual requirements that we have to meet.
Yeah.
Beyond that, those are really perhaps aspirational targets that a board and administration can set together. But our minimum standard right now is really our contractual requirements.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to share and kind of dovetails off of Ms. Phillips and Mr. Buno's comments. One of the concerns that I have, and we're going to get into it in conversation on reserves and use of fund balance in a few minutes, our ability to balance the budget with use of those resources is lessening. However, as we continue to go through and we take out things like curriculum writing, digital textbooks, payments for garbage, these are the non-instructional pieces. if you spend time looking at a line item of our budget, our non-instructional reductions, I don't want to be flippant, if you will, but there's not much left there.
Yeah,
We really have to get to a point where we're looking critically at how we staff our programs and how do we look critically at how we do that. It's really, this is my first run with this budget, to be honest with you. It's one of the areas that we're going to have to spend a lot of time on beginning next summer on looking at how can we reimagine, if you will, how we run our programs. What are we willing to make accommodations for? How can we be more creative with what we do so that we can get to a more sustainable point? Because you're going to see in a few moments, we don't have a sustainable future right now.
So that's why I was like, we start talking about what to do with the budget, but I think it's a little early for us to be talking about it until the two of you talk about the fund balance. I'm not ready to give you any information because I want to understand what you were just saying.
Yep. Other questions I can answer just on the proposed reductions at this point. Okay. So I just want to kind of set the tone before I turn the microphone over to Mrs. Mulligan. One of the things, if you go back to the previous budget presentations that had been of concern, is this extremely high escalation of use of reserves and fund balance to be able to balance the budget. We know that some of our fixed costs, if you will, staff and benefits, those costs are skyrocketing. We know that of our proposed increase for this year, even with the reductions that we've made, 42% of our increase this year is in the area of benefits. When you tie that directly to human capital in the district, teachers, administrators, support staff, bus drivers, buildings and grounds, those pieces are really where we're going to be able to balance the budget. And we're going to have very real conversations on where are we headed from here. So Mrs. Mulligan's going to give you that snapshot of the use of reserves and fund balance, and absent of any other significant changes, which we've made changes, the 25-26 budget reflected significant reductions in personnel. This has some smaller reductions in personnel. Even though we have those changes, we still have this gap that we're going to have to address and deal with. So that, Mrs. Mulligan, I'm going to turn it over to you if you don't mind passing that across.
Thank you, Dr. Coates. Okay. So first I wanted to start out just showing some historical information of how fund balance has been used to balance the budget in terms of what our actual revenue, what the budgeted revenues are versus the budgeted expenses, and then what has been bridging that gap over the years. Historically, were several years that number stayed the same at about $6.8 million for a while. And then beginning in 24-25, we started having conversations of taking a look at what our reserve balances are and if there were some opportunities to start to utilize some of them. So that's where the employee benefit accrued liability reserve has a healthy balance. It's not fully funded to the actual liability exposure, but in relation to all of our other reserves, you'll see that does have a healthier balance. So that's a little bit of the history, like the story behind of when we started to take a look at that. Also, the employees' retirement, the ERS, that's for our non-certified staff, that particular retirement system. These are money set aside to help offset perhaps rainy day, large increases in retirement contributions. So that reserve we evaluated, and it was very, very healthy, I would say. So we wanted to start to utilize that. And then moving into 25-26, we were more aggressive with that because the outlook on future budgets was going to be that we were going to start to use that. And we also wanted to shift and reduce what the actual appropriated fund balance is, ultimately trying to look to the future of trying to actually decrease what that appropriated fund balance and reserve number is. You can see that hasn't happened. We actually haven't decreased that total amount. I only put in data for this current fiscal year of what the anticipated actual use of that is and what's projected into 26-27. So In other words, we're going to be utilizing, we expect to utilize about $2.6 million of that appropriated fund balance that we had set aside in the budget. So we're not using all of it, because if we used all of it, we would spend that savings down quite rapidly. So going into 26, 27, we did recommend the same level of reserves and fund balance cautiously. I do say that it's cautiously. So we are projecting that we would probably use about $6 million of that. So I want to talk a little bit more about projections. And that's the
Before we go to the
slide.
next slide.
Yeah.
So in 21, 22, 23, there was use of a fund balance of 6.8 million.
Just to balance the budget.
I don't
So in
understand.
other words,
Yeah.
that means that the actual revenues that came into the district balance and the actual spending of the district, they didn't need to use it.
So they did not need, okay, so that's extra money. So they were ahead.
Yes.
So it's like the amount gets reappropriated annually, and the reduction of the reappropriation reflects how much we're using. Is that how it?
Basically, the budget was sufficiently, was at a very healthy size where you weren't really spending the entire budget allocation.
you
So
never
it was
used any
balanced
reserves.
with the revenues that were coming
Well,
in.
then what we did is we shifted to stay within the 4% cap. We always shifted money to other reserves.
Right, and that during those times. Now, I didn't give you the actual
That's what
results in those years. I didn't go back and look at
So
that,
that's
but
what you've seen.
yeah, generally what would happen is there may be a surplus that may have happened where actual revenues exceeded actual expenditures, which allowed us to fund reserves. For example, the bus reserve that we've been doing, or the retirement reserve or the capital reserves. They had started funding capital reserves during this time as well. And also during that time, there was fully funding of foundation aid, and there was also COVID funds in place. But at the same time, there was also increase in staffing and costs as well. So, so this is just a picture of just some historical perspective of what has been built into the budget to balance the budget. It doesn't necessarily reflect actual use, actually surpluses or deficits on that, but looking forward, we're looking to use about 2.6 million this year and perhaps up to 6 million next
So
year.
this year we had, not us, but the previous board had assumed they were going to use 7.6 million. And the assumption is they're only going to use 2.6. Right? Is that a fair assumption? That's what you're thinking right now.
Right. So based on like the decision to continue with the same level of appropriation, the decision is that you're anticipating that we're going to spend $6 million of that next year.
So we're not spending, so, sorry.
It's okay.
No, I have the same question. So
Okay,
please.
we're at 7.6 this current year, 7.6 this year. So the assumption in my mind was we were going to spend close to 15 million in reserves, but it's possible that we're only going to spend 8 million, 8.5. I know you can't guarantee anything, but am I reading that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's a projection. And I think it'll make a little bit more sense as
Okay.
we
All right. Thank you.
go through. Oh, I'm thinking my computer is going to advance. It's been some long days. Okay. Like, why isn't it moving? Okay. All right. So this is a little bit of historical, meaning just looking at the prior year, 24, 25, of what our actual financial results were. So for fiscal year 24, 25, our total actual revenues were $107 million. Our actual expenditures were $110 million, which means that we spent $2.4 million of fund balance and reserves. So our fund balance and reserve balance decreased by that $2.4 million. Looking into 25, 26, obviously that's the current year that we are in. We are, 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year. So we take what we've been spending and trend out the last few months with also some other adjustments on what we know. And we are expecting that total revenues will be approximately just under 110 million, but our spending will be 112. So we're anticipating that we'll have a deficit of 2.1 million.
I'm just curious, Jen, like, didn't we go like above the tax cap? Like, I was like looking at that 2.2 figure. Could you just like,
Yes, so we did go above the tax cap, but our state aid numbers, you might remember last year, we had a decent increase in our foundation aid, but we also had decreases in our expense-based aids, budget to actual. So when you look at the detail, right, maybe you would have expected that, you know, that would have been a higher percentage increase, but how everything fell out at the end, our actual state aid increase, I believe, was less than 1% when you looked at it in the big picture. It's okay.
I don't understand the
Yes, I'll
non-operating
explain that.
surplus. Okay, good.
Yes, so when we look at governmental accounting, it gets a little bit complicated in terms of what buckets that deficit applies to. So we have multiple layers of savings. We have general fund balance, we have unassigned fund balance, we have all these reserves that are set aside for a particular purpose. So some of those expenditures are related specifically to certain reserve buckets. So for example, when we're buying school buses, we have bus expenditures in that expenditure line, but it's going to only impact that bus reserve. That bus expenditure is not part of our general fund budget. So when you're looking at those two lines, that non-operating surplus are impact in our operations that have that do not relate to the general fund budget at all.
So
I
how's
have
it a
no
positive?
connection to the because I'd have to look at that specific detail, but in some cases there could be like back in 24-25 is the year we had significant appropriation of our capital reserve. Okay, to help fund the capital project. So that's why that number is so large. And the reason that we're showing that separately, because it can distort the story as to what's happening operational in relation to our general fund budget, because that year we did not have a $2.4 million budget deficit that impacted our general fund. It was really only $1 million because there were other planned uses.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So there's variations of different components, and we can do a deeper dive into that at another time. So basically, when we look, so 25-26, you know, those projections should be pretty solid, and not, you know, things still happen in this last quarter of the year that could change that. And so that's probably in the vicinity of where we might land. Then going forward, when we're looking at future years, 26-27, so we considered the reductions that were made for the 26-27 budget. So we did pull those things out, and then there's a variety of assumptions that were made. So we went through and calculated the tax cap for the future years with making certain assumptions. So that is part of the revenue number. We have a schedule of pilots. We know what pilots are coming on, or increases in those, or when they're coming off. So those were assumed in some of the revenue numbers. State aid, that's the one that could be, you know, obviously there's a lot of variability. We've heard, you know, that, you know, this is state, the tax revenues coming in are healthy right now, but then there's the outlook years on the state budget are risky. But looking at some historical data that has built in a foundation aid increase of 3%, assuming we are continuing to have stable or increasing enrollment. So, you know, looking at that, if we were looking at decreases in our enrollment, maybe that assumption would be different. Our expense-based aids, you know, are based on our costs. So we're likely going to have increase in costs year over year. So there was some percentage increases assumed in there. When it comes to expenditures, you know, we're looking at our collective bargaining agreements and trending and what those contract settlements are and making assumptions. The one thing that these projections do not consider is turnover. So regularly during the year, we have turnover of staff, which are positions that are planned to be filled in the budget that may not be filled just because of recruiting and resignations and just the timing of all that and being able to hire folks. So obviously that creates, it's not a good thing that we are, you know, but at the same time, it's actually saving. saving money in the budget. So those are things that are not in these projections. We can't predict those things. We don't have that level of data to be able to predict that reasonably at this point in time. So there's a lot of assumptions that go into it, but they have some basis to those assumptions. And these things can change. Like if we go back and look at projections a couple of years ago, the picture looked worse in these years than they do now. And some of that is because this does not assume any action. So obviously in this 26-27 budget, there's specific actions being looked at to make reductions. We don't know what that may be in the future or what other changes are. So this is just trended forward. So with that, looking at,
Ms. Mullen?
yes,
So regarding turnover, these numbers assume that all positions are filled? Is
Yes.
that- Okay, thank you.
yes. So then looking at 26-27, we could be having an operating deficit of about $6.1 million. And then that will compound further into the out years of 9.3 million and to 13.1 million. If everything was to stay status quo and some of those assumptions were to come to fruition. So when we look at that and we fold that into how, because obviously those deficits would roll into our savings, right? It would deplete our savings. So the next slide is looking at, there's basically two slides for the fund balance. This first slide is on our reserves. And then the next slide is on the remaining components of fund balance. So this takes those specific years and breaks down by our particular reserve categories and has those deficits built into that. So 24-25, we started a reserve balance at the end of the year was about 18.2 million. With needing to utilize those reserves with that deficit being incurred, though that reserve balance is projected to be at about 6.1 million by the end of 28-29.
What is there a standard that a district should have? Is there a percentage of reserves we should carry?
So one of the things in terms of our bond rating, so like Moody's, they'll take a look at that. OSC, the Office of the State Comptroller, will look at that in terms of fiscal stress.
Okay.
I had looked at, if you go back to I think it was February 25th, we did talk about a little bit about those metrics. And if we go below like 17.5% fund balance and percentage of expenditures, we could see downgrades in our bond rating.
Go ahead. I'll ask.
You know what I would love to see, like FTE counts like per category of, and I don't know if we've done this before, maybe we have, but FTEs, but like per category of employees section, like from, because what I'm wondering is just like over time, like how things have changed, right? Where are we at today? How do we create a baseline? Yeah.
So I did share that out with the board. It should be in your email.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
This is my last one. Potentially. If we're looking at the trended 28-29 of 6.1 million. How much of that is restricted and how much of it is unrestricted?
So the second slide will get into the unrestricted. So this is the reserves that are, this page is the reserve.
I'm
So
sorry.
the 6 million, that's okay. The 6 million is reserved. You will, if you go up a little bit higher, the majority of that is in the employee benefits liability reserve fund. So that is used to help fund our retirement incentives at the end of the year as part of our contractual agreements. So that's what predominantly that reserve balance is. And then we have a little bit remaining in our capital reserve for the bus and a capital project reserve.
Okay.
So basically all of the real operating reserves, if you will, that we can utilize as part of appropriating as part of the annual budget process are not available anymore by then.
You do such a great job explaining that I feel like I almost understand.
You really? I don't know quite yet, so.
Are you in like calculus or
Really
something?
So
Thank you.
Jen, just to kind of clarify a little bit. So on the page we're on right now,
Mhm.
capital project, capital bus, tax tertiary, the flexibility we have as a board to move reserves from one to another, where does that lie? For example, we have the monies in EBLAR.
Yep.
And in the past, we've taken money from the retirement reserves.
Mhm.
Are those all reserves where the board can authorize movement out of and changes to?
So every reserve fund has a variety of rules and details. So
right.
I'd always want to specifically look at that. So as an example, the retirement reserves, we do have the ability to do that. And we did that a few years ago to help fund the capital reserve because there was definitely excess funds in the ERS reserves. So the board was able to pass a resolution to do that.
EBLAR specifically.
EBLAR specifically does have rules. Actually, I looked at this today.
You probably know
I
this question.
anticipated the question, yes.
I always ask this question.
So there would need to be a certification by myself, basically, that would say that there's excess funds in that reserve.
So it speaks to, I think, some of the things that I've heard of the board members say regarding, I think, Jesse, the planning piece, why do we reserve that much money in an account that, based on the actual and the usage, typically isn't hit that hard, right? So that's really what
So here,
my concern is the amount
Yep.
of money that has been put in over time into the reserves
Mhm.
that are not really necessary to draw down when those actions need to be taken. So when people retire, we pay out the sick leave, all that stuff, it's contractually required. That it's, I don't like to use the word, it's fully funded and then some. I don't want to say overfunded.
so actually, I don't know offhand what the number is,
It's-
but
it's
this is
okay.
not our full liability in terms of, and that would be
Right.
one of the requirements that you would have to evaluate.
And you
the-
can certify.
Okay.
So the point being, you're not going to be able to certify. You won't certify it.
Like,
Yeah.
quick question. Like, thinking about movement of reserves, right? Is it like, what I'm wondering is the process of fulfilling an expenditure, right? How we fulfill that expenditure. So what I'm trying to say is that, let's say we got operating money, right? Like, I'm wondering, like, so can we just pay out of a reserve to unlock fund balance? Like, and I'm not saying like with that purpose, but my point is, like, movements happen in a variety of ways, right? Like, and I'm just wondering, is that like a thing, like where you could pay an existing a recurring expenditure with that and use a different pot of money?
We are to a point
Yep.
already,
Yeah.
but I
Yes.
think we just need to be mindful of, there's going to be a point where if we're getting closer to spending the actual budget,
Yeah.
our ability to regenerate those reserves goes away.
Yes,
So ultimately, your reserve balance is going to drop to zero.
absolutely.
And generally, the concept of reserves is for rainy day funds.
Yeah.
You don't want to rely on them for your annual reoccurring expenditures. So if there was something specific that was maybe more of a one-time or only happens once every so many years, perhaps using a reserve is an appropriate use of that. But using it to cover a substantial portion of our annual retirement contributions.
I've had
Yeah.
an experience where by authorization, the money was transferred when a district had a boiler go in
Mhm.
mid-year that wasn't planned for.
Yeah.
The
Yep. And
Well, the board's opinion was that there was enough money to cover current liabilities. They accepted the recommendation. They moved it to finance the payment to replace a boiler in the fall of the school year.
And that's a perfect example that happened here a couple times with the transportation emergency tank replacement project. I think the remediation at Belltop in the back of that building. So those reserves have been exercised, if you will, to help address those rainy day situations that happen to come
One-time
about.
expenses.
Yep, those one-time expenses. Or if, for example, the retirement contribution rates escalated in one given year substantially, that would be another example of a good use of a reserve to help bridge that, and to get that more incorporated into the annual
Totally.
budget.
I just want to say, like, because how much is a 1% increase in the tax cap? How much does that generate in revenue?
Our tax levy is in the low $60 million range, so about $610,000.
$610,000. Now, I remember just randomly throwing out, 8% last year as a figure, right? Like, I just want to just say, like, and looking at our current budget deficit, right, or operating deficit, we're about at a $2 million figure, right? And cascading that across our numbers, like when we say, right, 2 million, is it 6 million next year? Is it 9 million next year? Like from a compound like, and looking at the statewide picture, right? Like, I think a lot of districts are under stress, right? When we look at Liverpool, right, Plattsburgh, right, Saugerties, like you see a lot of school districts, right, under extreme stress. And what I'm wondering is, how do we prevent? So what I heard earlier you saying is about, you know, we have to be very cautious about the future outlook. And I want to say I'm not a fan of increasing tax rates. But I am a fan of thinking long term and taking medicine up front. And I don't know if that's through like how we get there. But I just want to just put that out there. Like, I totally hear like the reserve and fund balance picture. I do think we have some runway. Like like fund balance and reserves together. What is that figure as a
So this next slide,
Perfect.
it brings it all together.
Yep.
So this is the component of the assigned and unassigned fund balance, and then it gives us a total fund balance overall. That's that dark blue line. So basically, the assigned, unassigned fund balance is what's available to be used as part of either the annual budget process or to be within the 4% statutory limit on the unassigned fund balance. So at the end of the June 30th, 2025, that unassigned fund balance was a total of 10.7 million. Overall, with reserves, our total fund balance was $29.1 million, which was 26.5% of our annual expenditures. Okay, so when we incorporate, you see that decrease in the fund balance correlates to the prior slides of what the deficits are. That is what that total fund balance will look like
I'm
over
looking at the
time.
highlighted blue. I'm looking at the highlighted blue line. That's like our total fund balance.
The dark blue line
Okay.
is the total reserves plus.
But again, that's trended based on status quo and not
Yes.
doing anything.
That's
Yes,
right.
for sure.
That's right.
100%.
So.
Yep.
You know,
So it's really those out years. So when we think, and I'm just curious, like just thinking, we're going into 26, 27, right? Where are our actuals at today, like for this year?
That's.
So that
back
is.
on 3 pages.
On page 10.
Yeah, so here is what the projected is.
Yep.
So this is taking expenditures through March, the end of March, and bringing it forward through June 30th is about $112 million.
Okay. got it.
Now you'll see that that percent increase in the prior year is only 1.9%.
Yeah.
There were significant over $4 million in reductions in the budget. So obviously those actions resulted in a cost increase that was significantly less than what is being trended in the out years because of those specific actions.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we did a lot. Remember last year, we did quite a few options, right? We was here last year.
Yeah, for sure.
We did we went over the tax cap,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So we took those actions.
Yep.
And then we were very necessarily careful with our expenditures on top of that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so that's the kind of approach
Yeah.
you need to continue to take,
Yeah.
again, with not impacting programs substantially.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I hear you.
To the point where you're losing.
Yeah.
progress.
And sorry, Jen, just actually, if you can go back to the slide that you were on. So
I'm sorry.
The 1.9 is like what we did to be where we are today, but then we jumped back up to the 5.7. I mean, I think, Jesse, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but like maybe strategically or philosophically, where do we want to be trending moving forward? And what is that longer term planning? Or like, and even to the question about EBLAR, is there data showing when we might have, based on the age of our workforce, a pretty significant, group of retirements, and are we planning for that? And like, how do we sort of forecast out year wise where we would use those balances? And, I think to the question of can we pull from them, just I think some of that. I don't know, so maybe like a summer budget workshop or something to really get into some of that longer term planning
yeah.
might be helpful.
I'll tell you, one thing I like that they're saying, Sam, and Mike was talking about, like, because what I'm thinking about, like, literally the revenue track that we're on, right? Like really, and it's expenditure too, it's expenditure based too, and it's just like, at the end of the day, how do we flip the coin, right? That our expenditures continue going down, right? Like, and talking about calculus, right? Like how do we change the derivative? Effectively, the derivative is what's like our trend today, you know, is going to create a deficit over the longer term, right? And I'm just wondering, how do we position ourselves over the long run and have it be hard today, right? But that, right, year 2, year 3, but we end up on a, yeah.
So one of the things to keep in mind also, one of the oxymorons of this conversation is we're a district that's facing increasing enrollment right now.
Yeah.
So when you talk about expenses going down, I think the conversation needs to be, forgive me for simplifying it.
Yeah.
Our increases are like this right now. How do we lower the plateau a little bit so that our revenue can catch up,
yes,
with our expenses a little bit?
And really the main culprit of all this is in the health insurance arena.
Yeah.
Is really what is driving a lot of this. So granted, if we go back, I don't have it in this slide, but when we look at our overall employee benefit increase year to year as a result of some of the reductions that were taken as part of this process, the actual budget to budget increase is only 5.5% is what it actually works out to, but it's over 50% of the total budget increase. And one of the things that when you look at that projected to trended into next year, that's actually a 17% increase in actual cost. Okay, our budgeted cost is less than that because we had some changes in the number of plans. But when you actually look at the true cost, you know, with the premium increases, it's substantial. And so, you know, that could be one of the factors that's leading into that that is one of the major factors leading into that 5.7% increase.
I do want to say too, like, I think looking at last year projected numbers, I want to say, I feel like we were pretty spot on, like with where we are today. And that gives me confidence, like in the following year. Like, I do wonder, like, about the later, I do just wonder as you get further in.
So just in that, like, I hope that 26, 27 is closer to 4 million, for example. I don't know if we'll have that much variation in situations or dynamics that happen throughout the district. But, you know, because it doesn't include all of, you know, we made assumptions on the retirements at what step we were going to hire at, you know, so there's all these things and factors that could change.
But we still got to get closer though.
And there could be things that could change that to the not so great as well. So, so we just have to be mindful of that.
And from my perspective, obviously Mrs. Mulligan deals with a lot more of the minutia of this, to Ms. Phillips' point. That 5.7% is with the assumption that we are reducing staff next year. That's the concern to me. That is with a reduction in staff. Now, mind you, perhaps not as many as we need to get that trajectory down, but that is with an assumption of reduction of staff. And that's what concerns me on the benefit side when we continue those costs of our increase. Our benefits costs are 42% of our increase for next year.
And then just to piggyback on the retirement conversation and projecting that, like when we looked at what the budgetary changes and in bringing what the old salary, the old higher salary coming off the books and the new lower salary, and then health insurance, you have to estimate what the health insurance is coming on, but then we also have retiree plans that are coming on. So like the actual breakage in costs for that retirement is very small, like under $20,000. Unless we happen to hire staff that's right out of college and maybe on those very low steps. But until that happens, we don't know that. And obviously there's certain positions that we're challenged, you know, in hiring where we are needing to hire at a higher step.
If it's okay, what I would like to switch over to before we finalize this is really where we stand with enrollment. So Mr. Goodwin, if you don't mind switching presentations for the time being. And then we can go back to that one at that slide if you don't mind.
Dr. Post, just related to the FTE count, I was just wondering about over years, like
it's in your email.
It's in the presentation. It gives a historical in there. by grade level, by department, by position.
Over the last 6 years.
Yeah. So one of the requests that the board had made was just an update on historical perspective on class sizes and sectioning both at the elementary and the middle school. So Mrs. Mahar has made some updates and wants to just review that data with you. Ms. Mahar, I'm going to turn that over to
Thank
you.
you, Dr. Coates, and thank you, Ms. Mulligan. Presentation. I just wanted to give everyone, one of the things that's missing a word on here is the word projected. As you all know, that when we give a projection such as this today, this data is as of today. And I will tell you, as of yesterday, I updated this with several numbers increasing by many students. So it changes on a daily basis. So I wanted to just let everybody know that. The other thing I wanted to point out for kindergarten, for example, I have a star next to it, because that is our current number of registered students. Now, we have sent out packets and the numbers are much larger than that. I have asked our principals and they have been actively advocating to have families come and register so we can get a more accurate number of students that are going to be registered, because this number, as you can see, if you look down at the bottom, when it comes to our total enrollment, you can see that we're lower, but we know that our enrollment is growing. And so that number will go up significantly. And like I said, it had just today alone, it went up 8 students.
What grade?
Kindergarten.
Oh, I'm sorry.
just
Okay,
talking
yeah.
about kindergarten, so everyone can get a sense. So what we did here I asked, again, met with the principals. They've been, great, very helpful. They really also wanted to make sure that I emphasized that when we talk about enrollment and then we talk about average class size, and then you see over at the end how many sections that is by building, that the principals really take into account by grade level the number of sections. And today they've projected sections, but they use many factors to determine that. They think about the student makeup, student academics, the behaviors of students, and making sure that there's really a balance in those grade levels. And sometimes there are certain cohorts that it's better to have more sections than to have less sections. Might that mean that we have more students in one cohort versus another? So there's so many factors on top of enrollment. And then when we think about just grade level in general, in terms of what's the priority grade, where do we need to have low class sizes? Where can the sizes be larger? And again, factoring in that class makeup. So early projections, this will change probably on a daily basis, weekly, and by August, we will see a much different picture. But we wanted to provide you with that quick snapshot as of today. Any questions about the elementary level?
I have a question, actually.
Yes.
Go
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry, this might be a bad question. What do the asterisks go to on?
Well,
Janae?
we actually took off that, so I was just going to
Oh.
explain. So, that's a great question. Thank you
No,
for
it's
asking
not.
that.
I just-
We
No,
took that
it's-
off, but I'd like to actually thank you for mentioning that.
Sure.
So Janae has 2 asterisks and so does Red Mill. Janae and Red Mill School are our 2 ENL schools. And those so glad you brought that up, because the enrollment projection numbers for those 2 will probably increase. And the other schools will probably decrease, because what happens is we get students in, when they fill out their registration packets, they say, oh, my family is a student, we have a second language. But we don't test them it's called the NICETEL. And that test is what we administer to our students when they first enter. And it kind of tells us, are they eligible for ENL services? If they are, then what we do is we place them in one of the 2 schools. I'm happy to report that Red Mill will now, as of next year, be a K-5 ENL school along with Janae. And that's why those 2 stars are there.
Thank you.
And thank you for asking that and reminding me to mention that.
Lisa had a question on, it looks like the numbers for Janae and I think maybe Red Mill too, are down in first grade. Is that under the assumption that a section is going to be added?
It's not no, this is actually maintaining the sections. It's maintaining the total building level sections, but it's always a roll up, the enrollment, like the section is rolled up. In some cases, in other cases, it's depend on where the principal felt like there needed to be 2 versus 3 versus 4 sections.
When does that get made, that decision? At the beginning of the year? You can't do it now. It's made
It will be made up until including the last week of school.
I was gonna say August, okay.
I've spoken with some principals who 2 weeks before school starts, you're teaching third grade instead of first.
Oh, yes.
Each of the principals has had that conversation
Okay.
individually with me. You can have a huge delta at any point in the year. You have a new neighborhood that was built in one of the school communities, and families were more focused on moving in than registering for school. And then all of a sudden, the neighborhood said, "We're going to go register the kids," and there go those cohort sizes.
I see. Okay. Oh, but like kindergarten belts up. I understand now. I got it.
And just as a general comment, you had mentioned about looking at where, more staff can benefit and maybe there are areas where less staff, I would like to at least have a conversation about maybe like an adult to student ratio in K through 2, just so we don't end up with classroom teachers in a class with 24 first graders or second graders with no other adult supervision, even a part-time aide. When we look to allocate resources, I think that at those age levels, the student to adult ratio is probably a lot more impactful, a lot more important than say high school.
Yeah.
Where you can add a few more kids to the classroom and, it's not going to be that impactful because there's not that one-on-one work, that small group work necessarily with the teacher involved.
Okay.
I definitely agree. Like, especially at 24, because we're talking about 48-ish, it's like 16 in class. Like, 24 do sound like a lot to me. I'm not gonna lie. I know like 20, 21 is like, it's been good around there. 24 just to me strikes me as.
What's the contractual requirement in elementary again? What's the contractual max?
Kindergarten is 25 and 1 through 5 is 27.
Okay.
That's a lot.
Mike is one. That's what I would do.
I hear you. It's tougher times back then.
Tough on parents today.
I signed myself up for every single sport I participated in.
Does anyone else have any questions about the elementary? This is the middle school. So one of the things that the board asked for at the last meeting was just a 3-year trend of what the class sizes were. So I asked Mr. McHugh and his team to put together the past 3 years and what the class sizes were. So I just wanted to point out a few things for everyone, that the encores, for example, have fluctuated between 13 and 14 sections based on enrollment. As you can see, if you look at, for example, for projected 7th grade, we have 337. You could see that cohort back in 25-26 was our 6th grade. So the increase. But the other thing I just wanted to point out is, as of today, you had asked about impact, right? If we over time, with MAP, and you asked about class sizes, would that impact? And the projection, as you can see, there is not an impact. There's no significant one. The class sizes actually have maintained going down, but there's minimally increases in class sizes. So I wanted to just reassure you.
No, I appreciate it. And really, like, I was thinking like disaggregate, like I totally hear you, like in regards to like class size, because like I really wonder like within the numbers too, like specific populations of students, right? Like are all affected similarly, like do some changes work for some and not for like that's kind of directionally was.
Yeah, and it's sometimes hard to predict that until we're there.
Absolutely.
Right. And Mr. McHugh, I have to say, is very mindful of that.
Yes.
And I do think as he goes into next year without these programs, he will be looking at how he can support, especially that after that first month, what do we need to do? He has team meetings all the time.
Yeah.
It will be a constant reflection. And if and when we need to bring the programs back, we will bring them back better. And he's already assured us of that.
And I was wondering like if the board could get like disaggregated like information as a goal though, like just looking forward, because it's like I would just love to like just see, what I mean, that how the decisions that we make have an impact directly on kids.
Just, I don't know what you mean by disaggregated.
Disaggregated, like so like E&L.
What are you looking for specifically?
What I'm looking for is like student performance data, like as an
Oh, we have that. We have
coming
that.
up.
We get those performance scores all the time. So I think that it depends on how granular you want to get. We have the data. It's presented annually based on, right? So I think
have
it's
the star
how
data we're gonna show
detailed you
next.
need to get to make that decision is important. I think based on past history, the performance data is pretty good. So I think that's where we have to take a look at, proficiency.
Absolutely. No.
So how detailed you want to get by school and grade and
details.
class?
I'm thinking like categories of our equal opportunity policy, for example, we added in socioeconomic status. I mean,
I think
that's
it's in there. I think the status is in there, disabilities in there.
Not
Some of
in the one I'm gonna provide
Not on the
tonight.
star, but on the school
On
report.
the school
cards.
report
School
card,
report
yes, yeah. So I think the data exists, so the report we generated, depends on how detailed you want it.
Yep.
I think. Am I accurate in that?
Yes.
you are. Thank you.
So, Mr. Goodwin,
Here's
you
the
can
school
switch
board.
back to the other slide on the other projection.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to ask a question.
Yes.
Word languages, what do we offer again?
For French, Spanish, and German.
We're still offering German?
Yes. Don't say that with rumor about.
There was a conversation at the board level a few years ago, though. I'm gonna bring it back up.
That what did you say?
There was a conversation at the board level
Sorry.
several years ago about that. Check the notes.
So I did just want to add in terms of the student data, Mr. Temple,
Yes.
as part of the budget packet, not the one that you have yet, but the final budget packet, those, our district's state report card gets incorporated. So there's several pages of all of that data and how.
It's very disaggregated.
Very
Cohort,
disaggregated.
type, socioeconomic, special ed,
Where do I find that at?
So that, yeah, that's gonna be, I'll send you the link. It's
Perfect.
in the full budget packet, like the
Alright.
final budget packet at the end of the process of the beginning of the application.
That'd be good.
So talking about where we go from here then to wrap up this portion of the presentation. So next week, we'll have one final look at the budget. I will work with Ms. Harris this week to get some healthcare information. I'll get that out to the board. I will also look at some of the non-instructional pieces that we've been requested to look at as possibilities. So you'll have an opportunity to review any final data at next week's meeting, but ultimately you'll be asked by resolution to approve a number to go before the board for proposition in May.
What is our, everyone's here Tuesday? I mean, it's unusual, so of course our budget being voted on, right, by the board,
Yes.
on the agenda, so it's Tuesday for that reason, and then
Correct.
what's our numbers look like? Is it good?
And this is the
Unusual
last
day.
opportunity that we have. If any changes are gonna
Yeah,
be
so I
made, we
think
have
that's
to comment
important.
right now.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
You're-
the Tuesday is tough for me.
Tough for you?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I think it's important that board members who have
Yeah.
questions or concerns, get them to, Curtis, Jim, pretty quickly, so I can get your feedback in.
You have to adopt at the
Yeah, we got it.
meeting on the 20th next week. We'll also have the property tax report card ready for your adoption as well. We have included, as per your direction, the capital outlay portion in the budget as well. There will need to be a secret resolution for that work. We'll do that at the May 6th meeting. We'll have our public hearing on May 6th, and also just looking forward, the date for the official vote for both Board of Education members and the budget vote will be on May 19th. I did skip over the one recommendation for a due date, April 20th. The board candidate petitions for those running for the vacant positions will be due as well.
Dr. Coach, the capital outlay project, do we just vote on that as an inclusion in the budget, or will we be voting on the actual project that we're going to allocate to?
What we will do is, again, go back to the list of items that we had as a proposal. We're going to have to be transparent about what we intend to use that money for, but essentially you're voting on the figure again.
Just on the figure?
Correct.
Okay, but with the idea. in
With the
mind of what
assumption of
project
what-
is going to.
Correct, and that will go in the budget newsletter as well.
Right, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of wondering in the timeline. So we've heard about the projections with the fund balances and the concerns there. When are we kind of thinking about that long term? Is that anything that we would consider in the budget now? I guess kind of.
It's up to you, right?
thinking-
It's up to what you, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
you want, like, I'm not trying to put pressure just on you,
Yeah.
but us to say, we want to make more cuts now, or do we want to wait? I think Am I wrong on that?
So I want to kind of go back to some of the directive that we received in the beginning. And some of the directive that we received in the beginning was to minimize reductions in staff. And that was a goal in this planning process. We are certainly going to go back this week and look at the non-instructional side of the budget to see what other recommendations we could make in terms of reductions. You'll have an opportunity to deliberate that, but ultimately you're going to have to adopt a number next week. I think more of what you're asking about is more long-range planning on how to close some of that deficit. I think to the point that was made before, I think it's a really good summer workshop to look at how do you close significant structural deficits. I think that the bigger question is, does the board want to see the aggregate budget reduced by any amount for the 26-27 fiscal year? We will need to know that either tonight or shortly thereafter so that we could work on this before we get to the meeting next Tuesday.
And there's two sides to it, right? You have the expenditure side and you have the revenue side. So it's like, what I'm saying is that the board was interested in considering an above the levy increase. Like you would need to have that information, right? Like to have it impact your resulting figures, right?
So I'd have significant concerns about going above the levy now. I would have real concerns about that. I would encourage the board to look at if we're going to make any significant changes, stay focused on the expenditure side of the house.
I just want to thank you guys because this is, I know this is what I was seeking. And so I'm happy with you guys.
Thank you.
I guess that's actually where kind of my question was, because that's the one thing that could change between now and the election day for the budget would be the tax amount. So, I mean, there were some numbers, it was like a 1% increase yields about 600.
600 and change.
600 and change. And I mean, if there was some sort of, so when you go above the tax cap, then you need a supermajority to pass, right? Do we get anything if we do minimally above the tax cap, say?
Still,
If it's above the tax cap,
Oh, I know it's still super majority, but I'm thinking in terms of passability. That's a verb. Like if we did minor increases over the tax cap with like a plan, like tell the public, okay, we had to go over the tax cap last year. We're going to go over a little bit this year. And we're planning like the next 2 years to go a little bit over, but the 5 years before that or whatever, it was like 0 or less than 1%. But our plan is to kind of like go over 1% and then go over by 0.5% the next year. Is there any way to start compounding some of the revenue?
So I can share with the board, when I onboarded last summer, I was just inheriting a budget that had just gone over the tax cap, but also at the same time, there had just been a full reassessment in the town of East Greenbush. There was a lot of very negative feedback that I received. And again, it's just my advice to the board. I would not consider for the 26-27 fiscal year going over the cap. I think it would be a real challenge to pass the budget with that out there again. And with our relationship with the town of North Greenbush is actually considering a reassessment again. I think we just need to be very careful because where some homeowners were told, and I'm just going to use a figure for sake of conversation, that their taxes were only going to go up $700 when the reassessment went up. I had conversations with some community members where their taxes went up $3,000. So I got a significant amount of negative feedback when I first came on board with that from community and property owners within East Greenbush. I'd just be very careful about that. That's all.
Thank you.
Sure.
I do think, Robert, though, it's a good conversation for the planning component of the summer. I think doing options trending, looking at different potential, given 1% over, 2% over, whatever. Using a theoretical, because we don't know what the tax cap's going to be next year, roughly, but an idea. But it's a lot of assumptions, But it is a good exercise. But I agree with Curtis that was, as someone who experienced that reassessment,
Yes.
painful.
And just more generally, just figuring out where the lanes are. So not having to do with tax increases, but just getting the deficit under control in general. Will that fall to long-range planning? Is that board and admin conversations with?
It's both. So we have a long-range planning committee that is it's literally standing on the starting line of this process so far. we need to continue to move that work forward. But I think some whole board workshops with the administration, and to be honest, with all of our bargaining units, because we're in a position now where everyone has to embrace some of the changes that has to happen. I think getting everyone at the table together in a real workshop model, I think will yield some good results of where we need to land in the future.
Thank you for all of this.
Thank you.
Okay.
Who's it?
We already did the class updates. So now we're done. Star Universal Screener?
Yes,
correct?
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, and welcome to the beginning of the curriculum presentations. Some of you may have noticed that I switched the Star Universal Screener with the college and the high school course, economics. I had to swap them because of scheduling conflicts with the teachers that'll be coming, so they're able to come next Tuesday. So I'm looking forward to that presentation. But I think this actually is a very timely presentation because one of the things we asked about is what is the current temperature check of our we're doing in this district academically, and the Star Universal Screener can provide that information for us. So I wanted to just remind everybody that a universal screener is something that we typically, and you would typically do 3 times a year. It takes about 30 minutes for our students to take them. Now some less, some a little bit more. It's also what they call a computer adaptive test, which means each year the student starts at a baseline based on the grade level. And then as the students answer questions, it will adapt based on their ability, whether they answer correctly or incorrectly, the questions will adapt. And each of them have a set topic questions, and I'll show you what those are in a minute. A universal screener provides us as a district with a snapshot of our overall, that academic performance. And what I really like about this is that we have that snapshot K-8, which is more than half of our district. Looking to maybe bring a pilot into 9th grade English for next year because they're really looking for something at the high school. So we have early literacy. When you think about early literacy, right, we all think about foundational, right? Getting those children ready, building that foundation, like building a house, right? We've got to get the foundation solid so that we can build a house on it. You don't have a solid foundation, you can't have a solid house. The house will fall down. And then we have reading, which are our grades 3 through 8 they take, and then we have mathematics. So you might say, oh, I noticed that math is grades 1 through 8. Yes, they will take 2 up. So they will take a math and they will take an English one in grades 1 through 8. Kindergarten, we do not do a kindergarten math assessment in that grade level. So this initial assessment, one of the things I just want to emphasize is it's the beginning pathway that we take as a district that helps us to determine if a child needs some type of academic support. We have multiple measures beyond the STAR screener. This is not the only one. I know some of you might say, oh, you're just using one test. We are not. This is just the initial one that we use. That it's kind of like the pathway. Every pathway needs a starting point, and this is the perfect place to start. And then we have pathways that we've created where we have determined exit or entrance criteria for academic support. What I also wanted to point out is that these screeners have amazing reports. They give us instructional planning reports, and the principals and individual teachers, a school psychologist, we have speech, we have all sorts of different staff that utilize summary reports for classes by grade level, by building, and by district. So I want to make sure everyone understands some of the data that is explained in these reports. Everyone can really, get a sense of what it means for percentile rank. That is that performance level that helps us to measure the students and how they're doing. We use the word percentile rank. That's our percent proficiency. All right.
Lisa, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
Like when we say that we use this to identify supports for students, what are the particular types of supports that could result after this test or after the screening?
Multiple tests. This is the initial one.
Got it.
Academic intervention. It could be a tier 2. It might even be what I call a tier 1 plus, maybe within the classroom.
Yeah.
They might get an additional couple times a week, small group instruction in either reading or math. It could be intervention services where they get pulled out, where it's supplemental above and beyond their core instruction, which I'm actually going to talk a little bit about in just a minute. But those are just a couple examples.
And reason why I'm asking, because what I'm thinking about is thinking about district services that has the potential for being Medicaid eligible. I'm wondering, does this screener has any impact on what we would consider school-based Medicaid services?
Not for this particular
Okay,
one.
yeah.
Are there students that are obtaining services that might receive that? Yes, but not, this would not be their pathway.
Yep, yep,
We have special ed. This screener is for everyone,
yep, got it.
regardless of who you are as a child, what your disability is, what your ethnic background is. This is why we call it MTSS. This is part of our multi-tiered whole child. Everyone is screened regardless.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is that like, so like if someone ended up getting like OT, for example, or speech, you're saying that this test would have no bearing on any of those types of
The funding.
Got
no.
it, got it.
Yeah. So percentile rank, I wanted to just remind everyone, it is considered a normed reference score, and it measures students' reading and math ability. But one of the things I wanted to emphasize that it's something that is a national norm. So when something is national, that means that there are children across our entire nation taking this test. And these universal screeners, publishing companies, Renaissance Star, that's what we use. You may have heard iReady or NWEA. These are conducted across the nation to all types of children. So I often have sometimes a teacher that will say to me, oh, it wasn't a fair test. When you say normed reference, you couldn't get more fair. You couldn't get more valid and reliable. So these scores are very predictive. And one of the things I want to do in the coming weeks when I have my presentation on the New York State exams is I'd like to show you the comparability and the linking that we've done, which we've never done before. So I'm hoping that we have some good comparability, and I'm pretty sure we will.
Lisa, can I ask a quick question before you go on? So when you talk about this being compared to the national average,
yes,
is that national average that we get from STAR only compared to those students who are also taking, whose schools also subscribe to the STAR program, or is there some way that it's aggregated from all of the companies and compared?
It would just be
the
STAR.
STAR takers?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's hundreds of thousands of students across the nation though. Yeah.
Okay.
And what they do is they create percentiles and rankings for us so we can understand what that means, which I'll show you in a minute. They will make determinations. And one of the things that they recently did is they updated them because I'm not sure, many of you follow the news and you might have heard that nationally our scores are lower. And they recognize that. It's not just Renaissance Star that recognized that. iReady recognized it. I've asked all the publishing, these screeners, they've all updated their scores to make them. And I'm really happy to report is that we have shown a very small decline, very small decline, but not much. We're pretty much maintaining, if not going up. So I'm gonna show you our 3-year trends. I think you'll be really pleased to see this. But if you're ever wondering if you wanted to put it in a sentence for someone, I always like to give an example. If you wanted to say your child, because I know many of you are parents here, and you wanted to say my child got a 35%, you would say my child with a percentile rank of 35 performed as well as or better than 35, 85, whatever the number is, percent of other students in the same grade across the nation. A lot of us think 50. When you hear 50, you're like, oh, they failed. That's not what that means. It's not out of the 100%. It's a percentile rank. It's different. We're compared to when you say, think about when you went to the doctors, whether you went as a parent or you went your niece or whoever, if you're a grandparent, and they said they're in the 30th percentile for height and weight. We celebrated. Honestly, we celebrated at any percentile, right? It didn't matter. We just knew, okay, well, they got a little catching up to do, or they're 99 percentile. Wow. That's what it's like. So that helps people understand. And I just wanted to also point out that, they updated most recently the percentile ranks because what they were doing is we were comparing post-COVID, pre-COVID norms with post-COVID norms. When it's like comparing apples to oranges. So I just wanted to, if you've seen this model, This is it's a very common RTI triangle that we use, the tiered system of supports. So look at the green bottom tier 1. Everyone in our district, 100% of our students receive core tier 1 instruction. That's what they get when they're in the classroom, K-8, regardless. Everyone's getting it. What they're saying, what this model says, is that if your population in your district, if 80% of the students their needs are being met academically, then you're on target. Now, I always say, we want to be better than 80%, right? But I at least feel good that 80%, if we're there, whenever I look at our data and I said, okay, if we're there, I'm feeling good. We have 10 to 15% that are not and need additional support. So Jesse, they might go to tier 2. They might get pulled out at a separate time and go for intervention services with a reading teacher. Sometimes we have special ed teachers also doing that. Depends. Sometimes they get it right within the classroom, and we call that I call it 1+, right? It's just they get a small group a couple times a week. Targeted, okay? Maybe it's not working. We have data teams, and every couple weeks, every 6 weeks, we take a look at the data again. We do progress monitoring every 6 weeks. And let's say a student's not making progress. What do? We don't just stay status quo. You don't just keep going and expect different results, right? It's not working. We have to change something. So something might change. Maybe we change up the program we're using or the intensity. So we might move a child into tier 3, or maybe we say they made small progress. Let's keep them in tier 1, but let's change up the grouping. So it just depends. And again, like I said, sometimes after maybe 2 cycles, we might say maybe 3 cycles. Oh, I think we need to push them into tier 3, smaller group, different programming, maybe go more frequently. So that's what tier 3 is. About 5% of our students would be in that category. Okay, so if we're following that, right, as a district, I'm going to go now and look at the universal data, and I want to make sure we follow that. So let's take a look. STAR scores, everybody loves colors, right? So I'm sorry, the colors, I was showing someone this the other day, and I said the colors don't really match, but I'll show you they do match. The blue and the green, if you are in the green or the blue, those are considered proficient green, and then blue is called the on watch category, and then intervention is yellow, and then red is urgent. So I don't worry so much about the colors. I'll explain. So here we are. I'm just having 3 more slides to show you the 3 assessments we give. STAR early literacy, grades K2. So remember the percentile rank. Any student above the 33rd percentile rank. So that would mean any student that's in that green or blue, okay, would be getting their needs met in tier 1. 3-year trend. So just take a look at 3 years. Look at where we were in the fall of 23-24. We were at 63.8% of our students.
And that's coming out of COVID, right? Effectively.
That's right.
Yeah.
But look at how much that goes. Just follow the fall line and look at fall 2024-25. Look at how much it went up. Think about, we have summer, of course, we had a little bit of a summer slide, but not much, not a big regression. But look at where our baseline started the following year. Now that was the year, think about just now, not long ago, right? It was only really last year, we were starting to pilot and really bringing in the science of reading into our practices. We had already been 3 years into training our staff on best practices and how we can improve our foundational skill work. And we start to really see that. So right about 80, and that's where you want to see. So you can see we're right there currently. And I just was pointing out some of the things that are assessed in that foundational skills. So phonemic awareness, alphabetic principle, phonics, visual discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. Any questions about that? STAR early literacy, STAR math, even more remarkable. One of the things I want to say about STAR math, we've had a program we've been using. It's a supplemental program. We use Envisions. And we have it K8, and we've been pretty consistent with it. We have done a great job with mapping curriculum work, with assessments, and the work we've been doing with around the curriculum, it really does pay off. So we have great coordinators, we have great department chairs, and all of that, when you bring it all together, this is the results we're getting. We are well above the 80% in math.
You know how long have we used that program?
We've been using it about 4.5 years.
I remember
So I
Jim-
went back 3 years because
Okay.
I felt like the first years are never, they're always rocky roads in
Yeah,
the
of
first
course.
years. I'm hoping that we see.
I remember when Jim proposed that.
Yeah, it's when he brought me in. Yeah.
It's great.
This is what we assessed our on. And now math, what you're gonna notice is that the percentile rank, the green and the blue categories, okay, this is the combined amount, is a little different. It's 26th percentile. So anyone, it says number of students at or above the 26th. So this is our percentages. So pretty impressive for math. And then our last one is star reading. Just want to point out again, look where we started. I mean, I just look at fall 23-24 and look where we're at today. And I only did fall winter mainly because we are not at the end of the year as of this moment. So I wanted to just give everybody a sense, right? Beginning of the year, middle of the year, which we call fall winter, however you want to look at it. That's when we make our greatest growth. To be honest, I'm not going, we know what the end of the year is like for everyone. The biggest chunk, we're still making growth, but this is right where we're at in terms of our performance. So I just wanted to share with everybody that this is something to celebrate, that our programming we're in a great place. We're doing a lot of great things. This is the temperature check that is letting us know, a check under the hood, so to say, how's East Greenbush doing in terms of their academic health? We're doing really well.
Just a quick comment. I think that, it's really telling because I know several years ago when we went down that path, obviously with your new role back then, right? And then the focus with the administrators and the teachers all working together and learning more about, adopting these tools, using these tools and making those changes and shifting like you talked about. And it's really, that's the payoff right there. As a board member to see that kind of progress from those years is incredible. So thank you for that. Very reaffirming.
Yeah.
I agree with what Mike said. That's excellent to see. When we were talking about some of the programs, the Jumpstart and the math program, that this instituted may catch them earlier. And if they're at the 88th percentile moving up, maybe we won't need those intervention programs, right, in the middle school. Question about, you're using STAR at pre-K too, right?
We are. Yes. And remember I showed up at pre-K presentation.
Yes.
I gave you guys a quick snapshot, hoping by next year we have all 10 sites using it.
Okay, so we're still developing in some of our off-site places.
Yeah.
So one of my questions has been, how do we know the pre-K is using the STAR to assess kindergarten readiness, right? How do we know that the UPK programs are having the impact that we want?
Yeah.
Can we track that?
We can.
I know it's kind of a big question now if almost all of our students are in pre-K programs, but also is there a difference between the programs that they're getting, and to just make sure that they're consistent across all the different 10 different programs that we have running.
Right. So one of the things we are, by next year, my hope is that we have all 10 sites up and running so that I can give you guys some real accurate data in terms of, number one, how are the programs, the general health of each program. So you can see that. You can want to also see, you can even see that this year, to be honest. And I've actually had some opportunities, and I think bringing Brittany Harrison on board now, she's planning on getting in. I've asked her to get into the UPKs and help out a little bit. And she's ready to jump in and do that as well, because they really need to look at the reports. They hold such value. They're more than just giving you a snapshot and giving the district a snapshot, which is what we need and the state is requiring. But it provides you with that instructional planning, right? That's important. The standards are beginning at UPK. We can't have just a play-based UPK program, which we want to have play-based, but there has to be academic instruction going. We need to ensure that as well. And this is going to be a way for us to ensure it so that we know there is equity. We have a lot of kindergarten teachers that ask us, we see so-and-so kids coming from this program and we notice a difference. So how can we bring more universal curriculum to all of our.
It'll tell the story, right?
It will
To
tell
help you
the
guide
story.
The instruction. Can it be used as your universal screening?
Well,
Or
it's
you people-
according to the state,
really?
it's called a progress monitoring tool. I
Save some money.
I question that it could be universal screener, but they use this, the dial. Right now, we have the dial in one, we have dial in many of them actually that use that. They use that as their universal
It's
screener.
kind of a standalone.
It
Which
is.
doesn't give you the information moving forward. Yeah.
Right. And the STAR gives at the early list literacy for UPK, there is a small component on numeracy as well. So it is, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you,
Next week,
Lisa.
we'll be doing, well, next Tuesday, college and the high school. I'll have 2 staff members coming then. Excited about that, for that presentation. Thank you.
So before Mrs. Mulligan takes over on the Health Insurance Committee report, there's one thing that I'm going to solicit some feedback from the board on. It's been a growing matter that we're monitoring closely, especially at central office. It's in regards to remote work. So one of the issues we've been monitoring closely is a capacity issue, meaning having singular employees responsible for major tasks. So i.e. not to pick on any one person, but payroll. We have one payroll clerk in the district, and should that payroll clerk become ill, should that payroll clerk become incapacitated where they can't travel to work, that responsibility then gets shifted to another part of the office. Perhaps it's not well trained to handle it. So in the post-COVID era, remote work has become more and more of a conversation. So I'm bringing to you tonight, not a policy that I'm asking you to adopt. We would take that back to the policy committee if that's what's going to be really the direction of the board, but more for topic of conversation. Remote work is something, and we've had conversations internally on this, that it needs some guardrails on it, if you will. Right now, we can do things with administrative discretion, but absent of a policy, what's to stop one employee from arguing that they should be able to work remotely over another without a clear-cut policy? So again, this was a policy that I had adopted in my previous district. It's largely based on language that came from NISBA policy. There were some modifications I believe the board in Goshen made on it. But more so that I guess the question is, what is the board's feeling on remote work? I have concerns that I'd like to see some stricter guardrails put up on it. But before we would move forward with proposing anything even to the policy committee, I'm just looking for some feedback from the board.
Personally, my biggest thing is just making sure. I always worry about what I'm thinking about is just equitable process of decisioning and how it's going to go. Just ensuring and what I'm hearing is that I want to focus on operational necessity to ensure operational continuity. And I think just really delineating exactly what that means. And I think that if that's the target, I'm ensuring that it don't become flexible in some cases and not others.
Yeah, and just to back up that conversation, let me be clear. Our goal is not to promote remote work. The ability for us to collaborate, the ability for, how many times we walk up and down the stairs because I just have to sit in the office and troubleshoot something together. You just can't do that beyond the screen. This is more of an extreme circumstance. There's a power outage, that someone has some kind of catastrophe that they just can't get to the office, an ongoing health issue. One of the things I just want to be clear about, we do have capacity issues right now. We have singular employees that have tasks that if they're removed from the staff, other people aren't fully trained to be able to handle that. Payroll, some tasks in human resources, these are health insurance. These are things that we have significant concerns on. And not that we want to go back to our employees and say, well, you can work 4 days a week and work. No, this is something we really just want to have some structure on if the board is comfortable with going forward with a policy, number one, but then have really strict administrative guidelines about what is the intent. The goal is to have people in the workspace on a regular basis, but we've just been experiencing more and more issues that are starting to rise where it's, forgive me for being slang, clean up in aisle 5 because someone's been out for a couple of days and things fall behind.
I guess my only concern is a little bit different where, you know, I work in an environment where like payroll, I have payroll that I'm the only person with access to. But that means when I go on vacation, I am asked to do that payroll. And I want our employees to be able to take a vacation and not be like, I don't want this to turn into, oh, well, we have this policy, so we'll pay you for an hour. Like, I want to be sure that if they're sick and they want to just be sick, we're not saying,
Agreed.
but could you?
Agreed. Yep. Other thoughts or concerns with this?
With Goshen, did you have like a document that they justification for the work, or was it verbal, or what was the process?
We had a procedure. and it
Procedure,
wasn't
okay.
Part of the policy where it had to be with prior administrative approval. And it was really, to Mr. Temple's point, on the operational side of the house. It stayed pretty focused in the central administrative offices, sometimes in some of the people personnel and grounds offices. It really wasn't meant to be on the instructional side in the buildings, but it all had to be with prior administrative approval.
Yeah, the only thing I've encountered is some supervisors are more open and accepting of it versus others, and I think the consistency is the key here. I mean, generally I support it, but I just think that those pieces have to be addressed, and what positions you're going to identify and why, and you know, you run the ship, so I mean, it's
Like I said, I don't mean to be repetitive. I just worry about some of our capacity issues that we've had some issues that
it's exception based. Yeah,
we've had some struggles over the last several months with certain people having emergent situations that's taken them away from the office, and we just haven't had the backup to fill those roles.
Yep.
It's good continuity.
So I will take this, I will mock up a version to take to the policy committee and to bring something forward so that we can work through the policy committee and then ultimately get to the board.
Who's on the policy committee here, by the way? Cindy, that's it?
I'd have to look.
It just question came up in the AA learning committee. I was like, when's the policy committee coming again?
It was, it's the attendant. We've been talking about
Just
attendance. Yeah.
Yes, okay, just
Yeah. And I do.
don't have my booklet with me.
If it's just Cindy, that seems like a capacity issue.
She's retired. She got plenty of time. Unless she's traveling. I'm retired. Huh? I'm trying to recruit. I don't want to be recruited for this role.
Is this something that's board level? I mean, if you or supervisors think the work gets done and someone's working remotely and that works.
So
doesn't?
my opinion, just for, you know, the question of equity came up, to have a board policy that gives us some guardrails on this. I think administratively, we'd feel more comfortable being able to implement those regulations with a clearly codified policy.
Okay, yeah, and I guess I would just reinforce what our vice president said, like, I mean, the issue of capacity, if somebody's out sick, they're out sick. I don't know if the sickness, but I mean, if they got a flat tire, they can't just get to work, then okay, let's shift to remote. That's, yeah. And I see where it solves the problem there, but I don't know. Well, I guess this is widespread illness, not just acute illness. So, okay.
It's such a tough balance, right? Because sometimes there's some things that you just have, like, even if you don't do in that moment, like it's building up, like just like, you know, I was off today. I stopped into work just for a meeting, like one meeting, like, and it's like, I hate doing it, you know, but it's like at the same time, you get out of touch, you get behind, and it's like, sometimes it's easier to stay in touch. Like, so while, you know, and I think like largely it depends on like, you know.
Like I said, entering into this, the goal is to have employees in the workspace, working regularly in the workspace, just to have some regulatory access. To say when something comes up, we have some administrative latitude to administer a clear, equitable, fair process to say, okay, for these 3 days, yes, we'll authorize you to work remotely. Great. So Ms. Mulligan, I'll turn it over to you with the
Okay.
Healthcare Review Committee.
Great. Yes, thank you. Favorite
Good
topic.
news, right?
Yes, possibly, yes.
We had our health insurance committee meeting on March 31st. There's very detailed minutes, but just some highlights. One of the things that came about, Highmark is doing some transitions with the prescription drug plan in regard to utilization management. So there's a few things they're going to be going through a transition. This is a Highmark directed transition, not a consortium directed transition, effective July 1st, 2026, to go to their total utilization management. Kashik was the only remaining consortium in their book of business that was on a less regulated utilization management protocol. So some of the things that are happening, and it's really about just having some additional safety guards, about prescribing, eliminating waste, those types of things, some step therapy, some prior authorizations. Highmark did end up sending out 396 letters to our within the East Greenbush District, active and retiree letters. It could have been dependents, it could have been primary individuals. And it was about 90 days ahead of time. So we're encouraging our members to reach out to their providers to get a sense of what's happening or what's not happening. The one unfortunate thing is that Highmark has smart edits. And we're anticipating a lot of these letters will probably be cleared through that system, but they have no way to activate it until July 1st without turning the system on too early. So for example, there may be a different type of preferred drug that's virtually the same as the drug that somebody's on, and it may have a step therapy, but there may be an alternative just because Highmark has the preferred drug. So that smart edit will clear it, or the smart edit will look to make sure that they have that particular condition that will clear the letter. So one of the things that happened is a lot of letters went out. Perhaps it's a smaller group of individuals that will actually have an impact. The other thing that we talked about is just some cost savings in relation to copay armor. We started to talk about this last year. It's a coupon program. Highmark made a decision that they're implementing it, which is good. So we had a neighboring district that did a early implementation with that. And just in the first quarter, they saved $28,000 with that. Also, there's introduction of biosimilars, which it's basically, as some of these drug patents come off, they'll be a lot cheaper alternative. These medications, the cost will come down significantly. We also reviewed the new health insurance rates for 26-27, and we enhanced the rate sheets. It only provided monthly premium information, and we included annual plan cost on there because we thought it was important to really reflect as to what the annual cost of each of these plans are. We also talked about, we just started open enrollment this week. So all of our active employees and retirees have the opportunity to review their plan choices and make changes for the July 1st plan year. We also talked about Canna RX, which is another way to get your prescription drugs. And considering them to have them come in and present to the committee. East Greenbush is the highest user in the Kashik consortium of Canna RX, but the utilization is small, and there could be opportunities for more savings there. So we're going to bring them in, hopefully before the end of this school year, to just give a presentation to the committee, and then we want to do more on opening day with just wellness and just more education on the benefits, ultimately maybe try to drive behavior different too, which can ultimately save some health insurance costs. So that was the crux of a pretty productive meeting. Any questions?
A quick overview of the two committees for me.
Go ahead.
MTSS and SEO.
Go right ahead.
Portrait of a Graduate. Okay. I didn't put up anything because we do not, these two particular committees, we do have board members in the Portrait of a Graduate committee, but the MTSS SCL merged one. We do not. But I wanted to give a quick update. We have Brittany Harrison now facilitating that committee, and we've met 2 times now. We had to start a little bit later in the year. We discussed why we combined the two. As we all know, that multi-tiered system of support and social emotional learning really are connected. That whole child, whole, learner really it should be incorporated. One of the things we did though, because we started a little bit later in the year, we actually met with Jessica Harris, who was also in charge of SEL. We decided it was important to really do what's called a SWOT analysis. So to determine what's been going well, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities that we have that we haven't really reviewed, and what are some of the threats, like what are the things that are challenging us. And that took some time. We did that our first day. We had some share outs. We didn't get much farther than that. And then on the second day, Ms. Harrison and I went back. We really looked at the weaknesses and the opportunities, and we talked about what were some of the common themes with the committee. And we were really actually pleased to see that some of the things we're already working on, like we have tiered systems of support, and we have some things like, just going to point out just quickly a few that she had addressed with the committee. The themes. The data warehouse we looked at, and we're going to have to put that on hold, that we're doing some trauma-informed instruction, that we're actually doing that. We want to bring that more, into some of our opening days, and then to have some staff meetings. Some common weaknesses that we're noticing is that we need to do even a better job in our tier 1 supports and getting better buy-in and really bringing in the home, school, and community connection. So I also wanted to point out that Brittany brought together the committees and took the vision, the mission and the vision statements from each and kind of created one together to be a whole learner focused by creating a comprehensive, equitable, and inclusive system that supports students in their academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs while empowering our schools community to develop genuine relationships and the essential skills needed to reach their full potential and lifelong success. So I just want to thank Brittany for taking that on. She's planning on meeting with the committee one more time. She has some ideas about how she might want to, look to the future of the committee. She will meet with them and talk about goals for next year, and we'll go from there.
I'm just curious. So like I'm just trying to make sure, so MTSS, you're saying, and Portrait of a Graduate as a committee merged as a meeting?
No, MTS is from SEL. Social
SEL,
Emotional
okay,
Learning.
got it. All right,
Now,
all right,
ready?
got it.
We run over to Portrait of a Graduate
All right,
now.
all right, got it.
However, it's all incorporated.
Yes.
When you really think about Portrait of a Graduate is in everything that we do. So we do have a committee. We met on March 30th. We only met for about an hour. We did a quick review. We are aligning the New York State portrait with the East Greenbush portrait. First time we met for several hours, and this time it was a really short time. We kind of went back, we looked at the reviews that we had done. We really solidified that our competencies need to maintain what they are. We've already actually done a lot of work this year in the buildings. A lot of the schools have already embedded it into their character education. A lot of the staff are already incorporating into their lessons. So instead of changing the competencies, one of the things we discovered through shared decision-making was that we really didn't need to change the competencies. We needed to change they're called the statement of intent. Like, what do we mean when it means a competency and what we want a profile of a graduate to have? And how do we just change those statements to incorporate, for example, New York State has academically prepared, future driven. When you think about academically prepared, that's in a confident learner. That's an effective communicator. That's someone who's adaptable. You think about future driven, that's someone who's adaptable. Those are just, we already have it. We just have to make sure that we have it in our statements of intent. So we're planning on making a one-pager, not myself. I have recruited the graphic design class at the high school to actually develop. So we'll take our 2 portraits, which are over there. We have a one-pager with the 5 copies. Then we have the statements on the next page to develop it into a one-page, right? Like New York State, so that people have it at a glance. And then we'll meet again and we're going to revisit our roadmap, because we really need to take our timeline and our roadmap, which we developed last year. We actually need to revisit it and we need to align it to our strategic plan. So that's going to be the big project next time we meet.
I got 2 questions.
Yes.
One, how are we thinking about the characteristics across different subject areas? Are we doing that yet? And if we did, what might that look like? And I'm thinking like, for example, critical thinking in English versus a subject like science, right? Or thinking about like effective communicator in like social studies, right? How does social studies add to effective communicator? And just looking at it from a discipline area perspective.
Right. So I will tell you this, one of the things when we worked with last year, Battelle for Kids, we had in our roadmap, the idea of developing something called learning progressions. And what does it look like to be a critical thinker at the elementary level? Not necessarily in science or math, but in general. And then what does it mean to be a critical thinker in the middle school? And then what does it mean to be a critical thinker in the high school? Our plan was to create these progressions, which again, that was last summer's plan, and last summer it's here and gone. And so we just need to revise the roadmap. We're going to get there because I'm driven to make sure that we have our strategic plan in place and that we're doing that. But one of the things I'd like to do is make sure we're bringing things like that in. Summer curriculum work. We just met with our teams today, my subcommittee, and we approved summer curriculum writing projects. And one of the things for next year that I would like to do in the roadmap, it will be to ask people to really look at curriculum proposals and how are you tying in critical thinking, competencies. How are you bringing it in? Where are you? It shows up everywhere. If I asked a teacher today, show me where you're bringing in adaptability, critical thinking, they'd have it. Absolutely. I know they would, but how do we make it intentional and ensure that it's big accountability? We'll do that.
And the only reason why I ask is because think about like cultural competencies, right? Like in global perspectives.
Global citizenship.
Right. Absolutely. Like I think like there's different opportunities when you think critical thinking in like English or social science, right? Then you're gonna get like when you think like math and sciences. So I think like really leveraging like the curriculum as a whole really gives you unique opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely does. Thank you. That's all. Thank you, Dr. Brooks.
Sister Temple, like another way of approaching that too, is like breaking down, what we mean by critical thinking into facets. So I was on a first year liberal education program for first year college students. So we had faculty across disciplines, and as a group we had I think there were 7 facets of critical thinking. And so we each kind of reported how our classes might be addressing some of those. So like a science class might be addressing these 3 out of the 7, and an English class might be addressing these 4. They would be different ones, but that everyone at a certain grade or at a certain level would be encountering all of those facets, but in different classes. And what I liked about that was really thinking, well, what do you mean by critical thinking, and how does it change across disciplines?
And I think too, across disciplines, but I feel like the learning progression is really going to be helpful for, we have to create those so that people understand, what does critical thinking mean? Everyone has a different idea of it, and it's really unique to think about critical thinking actually has a component of adaptability in there, empathy in there, to being an effective communicator. You have to be, it's amazing how many of these competencies are all intertwined, which is part of the reason why we want to change a little bit of the graphic, that we want to incorporate a tree in somehow to show our tree too, but just the evolution of it. I think that was really important for us as well, and how it is cyclical, that everyone is connected and they're intertwined.
Another thing I was wondering too is about measuring progress. Like, what are we going to use as barometers of progress?
Assessments, alternative assessments, rubrics, capstone projects.
Absolutely.
We've got so much work to do. And that's where I vision all of it happening. The changes that we're going to make, and hopefully one of the things I didn't mention is that we are part of now, we have a very small cohort going to Questar 3 as part of what's called a design team. And this design team is going and learning about most current up-to-date New York State Inspires initiative. So the New York State Inspires initiative, Portrait of a Graduate is just one piece of it, right? We've got new graduation components, the new pathways, we've got the new instructional requirements, personal finance education. There's many parts to this initiative. So this design team is going and learning about, one of the things we learned about last time was project-based learning and the pilots that are going on. And I foresee performance measures are going to look very different in the coming years, in a good way. It's gonna really, and it's really gonna address every child that's sitting in front of us, regardless of who they are, what they look like, where they come from, what their ability is. Thank you. I could talk about that.
Okay. Moving to discussion items, I don't see any, regular business or new agenda items. No table motions.
What is that? I don't understand. What is it? Why is that there? Is there something that was supposed to be on there?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Any questions or comments on the consent agenda?
No.
None.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Can I second? All those in favor?
I just want to comment, quick comment, congratulate retirees, Bill Clum, Patty, Pam, and Bill being honored at the Ed Foundation is wonderful after his many years of service going to the district. So if you got an opportunity to go to that foundation dinner, it's a great event. And athletic, again, reminder, Athletic Hall of Fame.
And I think registration closes tonight, so if you haven't signed up, go do it.
Good events.
For the Ed
The
Foundation.
Ed Foundation.
Good
Gala.
prizes. Raffles.
No new business, public forum, anybody else?
If I may. Thank God, but I'm just kidding on myself. Anytime I get a chance to talk to a microphone. Thank you. Good evening. I'm sorry. Oh, I forgot my phone to time me. I promise I'll be less than 5 minutes. I know you're weary. I am too. How you guys do this every other week is beyond me. So my name is Mark Halsey, and I'm here tonight, as I'm sure you've heard, that I was notified yesterday that due to the fiscal shortfall of this coming school year, my position as the Assistant Transportation Supervisor is slated for elimination. I understand the struggle that goes into balancing the budget, and I certainly have nothing but just the utmost respect for Miss Mulligan, Dr. Coates, for Lisa, and everybody that works so diligently to keep things moving forward. So I am not here to beg and plead for my position. I'm here just to simply let you see a face, put a name, and give you a little bit of history and insight behind the decision that ultimately you will be making in the next few days. I have been an employee with the district since the fall of '99. I've worked alongside 5 supervisors and 5 superintendents, which one of my mechanics like to call Super Nintendos. During this time, I have served many roles. I've been a sub driver, permit driver, sub mechanic, senior driver, head driver. For the past few years, have served as the assistant transportation supervisor. I've dispatched, covered daily absences, covered sports trips, done the majority of the routing from 2005 to 2021, reviewed district tax maps and addresses. And most importantly, at least for me, I've built trusted relationships with our building administrators and our staff. And here I am, and I truly love what I do. My salary is $95,409. I do not use the district health insurance. I'm currently 39 months away from retirement, and was honestly completely blindsided by yesterday's news. I've served well, and I've always prioritized my job, as can be seen in my attendance record, currently having over 300 sick days and unused personal time, as well as 41 vacation days. My position as assistant supervisor has transitioned slightly from when I started to where it is now. In April of 2024, the impending retirement of our previous head mechanic, with the impending retirement, our previous administrator tasked me with overseeing and revamping a struggling and disorganized maintenance department. This was an effort to establish policies and procedures that would set us up for success when a new head mechanic was hired. These functions are all outlined in the assistant supervisor's job description, and include various things, including supervise service, maintenance, and repair, prepare reports about fuel, approve purchase of parts and material, oversee automotive mechanics and preventative maintenance and repair work, et cetera, et cetera. The position of the head mechanic has been posted twice, once in February of 2024 and the other in June of 2024. And I believe that I was the only applicant, and the previous administration opted to not fill that position. I'm currently on the Rensselaer County Civil Service list for the position of head mechanic. Since July of 2024, my primary role has been to oversee and manage our maintenance department while continuing to support our senior drivers, another task of the in the job description, with routing issues, driver and parent complaints and concerns. In this time, I've been able to get our maintenance department with a fleet of roughly 100 buses updated and streamlined using new maintenance software. Utilizing the software, we are now able to accurately capture parts and labor cost, our parts inventory, and service reminders and schedules. We have implemented a system of daily assignments and expectations. Work is assigned daily to make sure we are meeting our DOT required service intervals. We are no longer 40 to 70 days behind as when I started in preventative maintenance. We are currently 6 days ahead, which allows us the opportunity to be proactive, catch small issues before they become big issues. We continue to keep buses on the road and not out of service for weeks or sometimes even months due to overlooked or untreated issues. I can proudly say that our goal is to maintain safety and consistency for our staff and for our students. We continue to maintain a 97% DOT passing rating and constantly strive to do even better. With that in mind, it's important to note that we also have an aging fleet, which I know you have discussed before. Approximately 21% of our vehicles are at least 10 years old, and another 12% being 9 years old. The elimination of a position of this type sets the district up for future failure, in my opinion. Our 12-month staff is already overloaded as we share in the 10 to 12-hour work days 4 or 5 days a week. If this elimination is to proceed and I return to being a school bus driver, I would just kindly ask that an agreement would be made with CSEA to return me to the CSEA seniority list based on my district seniority. Having to go to the bottom of the seniority list this close to retirement would be a terrible detriment and an estimated 60% decrease in my earnings. I know that I have had many struggles and many failures here, and I acknowledge those without hesitation. However, I hope that people see that I have served the East Greenbush community well and will continue to do so until I am able to retire. And when I will most likely be back to fill in as needed. So to conclude, my request is simply this. I hope you look past the dollars and cents of the budget, but I get it. Money's got to come from someplace. And if it's me, then it's me. This isn't just about me, though. It's about the overall operation of our school bus fleet and our daily operations. For my remaining years and for whoever the person that might come up behind me. Cutting corners for students and driver safety is always a risky business. Regardless of the outcome, honestly, I am proud and I will continue to be proud of my work here, whether as a supervisor or as a bus driver. I'm proud of our district and how we just provide unparalleled service for our students. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Can you hand that in, your notes? I think it should be.
I think it's trash, but I'm welcome to share it, or I can certainly forward it.
Yeah, you should email it.
Okay. Thank you all.
Anyone else? Board?
Almost said things.
I just wanted to say I'm excited to attend the multicultural fair at the high school tomorrow, 5:30 to 7:30.
I'm assuming that next week we're gonna do the AI learning committee kind of update.
Oh,
Peter,
yes,
Lisa?
well, we just thought it was just the timing.
Understood. No, I think I think it would be good because, one of the committee members who spoke during the public forum, there's some of the things that we were talking about were addressed in that conversation. And I think it's important, we talked about outreach and communication. So I think that covering some of those topics in the update will be important. It's exactly what we talked about, like people are asking. And I think that it's important that we kind of give a progress. Thanks. That's it.
I think everyone got an email from Robin Emanation about Tech Valley and the opportunity. I don't know if we have students there or if we have students who are interested in going. I've spent some time recently there as a consultant, so it's a really fabulous program. So if you don't know what it's about, and I have worked in education as a school counselor, as an administrator, and I learned a whole lot about what the student experience was. So I thought I knew everything I knew about Tech Valley, but I learned a lot. So that email welcomed the board to go visit the program. I think also STEM High School is another opportunity for our students. So it just opportunities our kids are interested in and are available to them. Good to know what we're sending them to.
And if I may, we have 7 students at Tech Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've consistently sent two every year for a long time, and we've been a big subscriber of the STEM high school, so.
Yeah, 22 or 23.
Yeah, 20, 22. I think.
Me too.
So I misspoke. Time for the multicultural fair tomorrow is 5
No, it's
o'clock to
5:30.
7:30.
It's 5:30.
Oh, it is 5:30.
There's a second email.
There was a second
Oh,
email.
okay.
It's 5:30. And you already said your piece. You can't. speak.
And we do need executive session, so motion to move to executive, Rob, Sam, all those in favor?
Bye, thank you.